on the land in the first place?
Not by the Bible. You can't draw modern nation states based on a document that hardly has precise geographic indicators written 4,000 years ago.
But how long must someone live on the land before they should have rights to it? I'm not advocating anything myself, but I mean, I remember...
But the turn of the century, only 6% of historic Palestine was Jewish. So, you had the Zionist project imported Jews from Europe, starting roughly in the 1920s, to possess land where people had lived for centuries. They were interlopers. They were colonists in the same way that we were colonists, in the same way the British were colonists in Ireland for 500 years, the same way the British were colonists in Kenya or India. They came from the outside recently, historical time.
What do you make of the retort that they weren't colonists so much as they were fleeing a...
Well, that was true after World War II, not before.
Hadn't they experienced rampant...
You had pogroms, that's right, by Russia. I mean, that was one of the interesting things about the Zionist movement, which was formulated by Herzl and kind of upper crust European Jews. They had no intention of going there. It was a way to keep the Jews from the shtetls in Eastern Europe out of London. There was an element of racism even within the Zionist movement itself. But this was, as Hannah Arendt said, after World War I, with the resettlement of Jews who had been not only driven from their homes and put in concentration camps, but when they went back, we know, to places like Poland and tried to move back into their homes, were met with pogroms that we're talking about after World War II by the Poles, attacked, killed, because those Poles or Europeans who had taken over Jewish property didn't want to give it back. So that is part of the tragedy, in that they had nowhere else to go. It was especially a country like Poland, it was dangerous for the few Jews who survived to go back. There's a good book on it called Neighbors by a Polish historian whose name escapes me, but it's a very good book. So they ended up in Palestine. And they took other people's land. But Hannah Arendt said, the crime that was committed against Jews is not solved by committing a crime against Palestinians. And that is the tragedy of modern Israel.
One of the other common narratives that's already come up when we were discussing the Christian far right is that Jews have a divine right to this land. And maybe you will tell me that this isn't in the Bible. I wouldn't know that. But if it is, why is that not an argument that you find appealing, that this land belongs to the Jews?
Well, I don't think God's a real estate agent. The term the Holy Land is a Christian term. So what were the Crusades about? The belief that Christians, through savage violence, had a right to occupy, quote-unquote, the Holy Land. And anybody who knows the history of religion will tell you it's, one blood-soaked episode after another. So claiming a divine right, or claiming that God gives you the right, is the kind of absolutism that justifies mass murder. And I don't care what the religion is, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. Because what it does is it externalizes evil. Evil is embodied in the other, and once you eradicate the other, evil is gone. And I think this, for me, as somebody who is religious, that is a complete inversion of the understanding of evil, both in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Gospels and in the Quran, because the Prophet talks about the 3 levels of jihad, with the greatest jihad being the struggle to curb the evil within you. And There was a theologian, H. Richard Niebuhr, who said, religion's a good thing for good people and a bad thing for bad people. And that's kind of it. So I find all of these efforts to sacralize violence to be very frightening.
Well, this is another good question to ask a theologian.
I'm not a theologian. I am a minister, but I wouldn't go so far as
You've
to call
got a
myself
master's in divinity.
Well, that would not, for my professors, in any way legitimate me as a theologian, I can assure you. But anyway.
But anyway, yeah, the question that I have is, if you're not supposed to take your teachings by, even if not literally, reading the Bible very closely, where are you supposed to get information about God and what God wants and ordains?
Everybody who reads the Bible is a selective literalist. They pick out what it is that they want. I mean, we in the Presbyterian Church did not spend much time on Revelation, for instance. This fact, Martin Luther, when he translated the Bible from Latin into German, wanted to put Revelation as an appendix. He didn't even want it in. The Bible is a complex mix of many theologies, both within the Hebrew Bible and as well as in the Gospels. Some are Gnostic, some, like Paul, are based on the law, or very legalistic. You have all sorts of, Ecclesiastes could have been written by Sartre. It's a mix of stuff. And I think one looks for religious or divine inspiration, but not through literalness. Are we supposed to literally abide by the strictures of the Hebrew Bible where adulterers are stoned to death? We don't. Nobody does that. Even the Christian right doesn't do that. So it's always selective literalism. And if anyone ever tells you they read the Bible literally, they're lying. Because they pick and choose what works for them and what doesn't. There are passages in the Hebrew Bible where God blesses acts of righteous genocide. There's no question about it. And yet, for me, the beauty or the power of religion is that it struggles or it grapples with what I would call the most important elements of life. And these are the elements of life that cannot be measured empirically. Beauty, grief, death, the struggle for our own mortality, a life of meaning, love. Freud said he could write about sex, he couldn't write about love. And the Buddhists have a saying that you can memorize as many sutras, laws, as you want, it will never make you wise. And I think great art and the great religious thinkers struggle with the key and most important elements of human existence, which is why it's important to me. But I don't take the Bible literally. I don't believe that we can create nation states based on the Bible. The Crusaders tried it. The Zionists try it. But I also think that it's, certainly in my own life, it's extremely important because it gives me an understanding that there's a moral imperative to stand with those the theologian James Cone called the crucified of the earth, and an understanding that when you truly stand with the oppressed, you will end up being treated like the oppressed. You're not going to be the world around you is not going to reward you for virtue or what you consider virtue. And that's a really important lesson to have, that the reward is the maintenance of your own integrity and also that solidarity. So I did not vote for Joe Biden. I can't vote for anyone or Harris or any of these figures who supported the genocide because I have friends who are victims of that genocide. And I have to go back and see them and say, however ineffectual everything I did, every single thing I did was to stand up against what's happening to you. And that attempt on my part, that's why I teach in a prison, to build relationships with oppressed peoples. And remember, privilege, and especially white male American privilege, as King is really the theme of King Lear, is a form of blindness. Privilege is blindness. And the more you strip away privilege, the more you're able to see. But even though I speak Arabic, even though I've spent months of my life in Gaza, I can finally never understand what it is to be a Palestinian. I mean, they can't leave Gaza. They have no travel documents. They have people born, probably most of those people who crossed the border on October 7th had never been outside of Gaza, ever. And if you honor that gap, that inability to see, then you can have real relationships with people who are oppressed. And those relationships are important because I think too often liberals, for them oppression is an abstraction, but when it's embodied in people you care about, you can't betray those people, first of all. And second of all, many people say, because I teach in a prison, as I mentioned, in the college degree program offered by Rutgers, and people say, well, wouldn't it be depressing? And I said, no, it's the highlight of my week. Partly because in that classroom it's sacred space. It's the only time in the day when they're treated as dignified, sentient, thoughtful human beings. But it creates anger. I mean, if you're not angry at injustice, at what's being done to them, then you don't have heart. And as Augustine said, courage has two beautiful daughters, hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are and courage to see that they don't remain the way they are. But I don't think that courage is possible unless you have real relationships. So all of my work as a journalist was in the global south, with oppressed, whether I was in Sarajevo, whether it was Salvador, whether that was in Gaza. I've always purposefully embedded myself in these communities that were under pressure, terrible oppression.
One through line of this conversation for me, as we continue to get more personal, is that you have a tremendous amount of integrity, and that's very clear to me in this conversation, because as humans we're also good often at telling whether people are being honest with us, and I sense that you are. I wonder where you think that this comes from, because integrity is really lacking in most people. Where do you get yours?
I think it's from being close to people who had tremendous integrity, including my father. So he, as I said, was in the civil rights movement, and the gay rights movement, for which he was pushed out of the church. And there's a book by, I think his name is Richard Rhodes, it's called Why We Kill. It's a great book. He's a criminologist, and it's about why people kill. And he talks about phantoms, that many people who commit acts of violence are victims of terrible violence in their own childhood, and that when they react to situations with violence, they're reacting to those phantoms who had terrorized and carried out violence against them. But I think we also have phantoms of people who we can't betray, who stood up at great cost and carried out acts of tremendous courage, sometimes losing their own lives. I think those are also real. I think that's, for me, it's about being around people like that, including some of the reporters I worked with who were killed, including my close friend Kurt Short, who I worked with for 10 years, was a Rhodes Scholar. And you kind of can't betray. I think it really is reduced to that very personal level, just as I think that if you really care about people who are being oppressed, you have to have real relationships with, and not patronizing. It's not going to a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving and giving them food. but real relationships. But I think the same thing is true, that it's it is the power of their witness kind of in the end, because, I feel fear like everyone else. And let's not be romantic about reporters. It's a very aggressive, competitive. I could be a total son of a bitch when I had to be. I don't, it's, even a kind of callousness in a war zone, I think, kind of black humor. I mean, all of that. And I talk about that in my book, War is the Force That Gives Us Meaning. I don't in any way want to pretend that there isn't a dark side to myself and a dark side to what people like I did. I think in the end, what we did is good, but there's a lot of darkness there too. But yeah, I think it is those figures who we can't, because they're not here anymore, have to stand with.
I'm curious what you think about the connection between integrity and the dark side with which we began this conversation, which is depression, because I think that integrity and depression are connected in interesting ways. On the one hand, these are just my thoughts, and you tell me what you think, is that integrity can be an antidote for depression, because integrity also represents self-love and self-respect, and I think depression often comes from not having those things. But then at the same time, when you are very depressed, you tend to be pessimistic, and I'm speaking from experience, and think much less of yourself and everything you do, and that leads to an erosion of integrity and self-esteem. So I'm curious about how you've experienced the two.
So I would say my depression comes from a sense of helplessness, not from a lack of self-esteem.
But a sense of helplessness and powerlessness go hand in hand, and I think having a sense of power and autonomy is pretty vital to self-esteem.
Yeah, but
often.
Also power can be a poison. I saw it. Even good people can get seduced by power and it becomes poisonous. I think for me I look at what's happening in my country. I look at what's happening to my Palestinian friends and colleagues. I look at what's happening to the climate. I think I have pretty rational reasons to be depressed. I have children. And I think that comes from a sense that these forces are so overwhelming and so powerful that, I will fight against them, but there's not much chance that I'll make much of a dent. I think that's, I remember when I went to divinity school, I lived across the street from a housing project in Roxbury, in Boston, which was the ghetto. And I ran a small church there for 2 years, and I used to commute into Cambridge to go to school, go to class. I always say it's where I learned to hate liberals, all these people who talked about empowering people they never met. They could have gotten on the Green Line. It was a 20-minute ride, gone out to see where people were being warehoused, and police violence, and all the interlocking systems by which we keep the poor. And Cornell West once asked me, of all the experiences of my life, what was the most impactful? And I said it was living in the ghetto. I was a white person, not understood institutional racism and how it works. And I went back and saw my great mentor, Coleman Brown, who was the chaplain at Colgate, where I went to undergrad. And I just sat down. He had been an inner city minister in East Harlem in Chicago. And I walked in his office and I sat down and I said, are we created to suffer? And he said, is there any love that isn't? And I think when you love deeply and you care deeply, especially about people who have been forgotten or abused, it is the acceptance of suffering and depression. And I think that you're sustained to continue to fight back by the power of the relationships that you have. I remember once I was teaching in the prison, and I had this wonderful student. He was A student. I don't give a lot of A's, 2 or 3 in my class. And he'd been picked up at the age of 14 in Camden, New Jersey. His parents had died. He was living on the streets. He was illiterate. There'd been a rape and a murder. They dragged him. He was 90 pounds. They dragged him into the police station. They browbeat him to sign a confession he couldn't read. for the rape and the murder, he got to court and heard it, tried to protest. They ignored him, and he was sentenced as an adult. And he wasn't eligible to go before parole board until he was 70 years old, which doesn't mean he'd get out. It means the first time he got asked to get out. And in the prison, when the bell goes off, you gotta get in the hall quick, or you get what they call a charge. And he waited to that last minute on the last class, and he said, I know I'm going to die in this prison, but I work as hard as I do because one day I'm going to be a teacher like you, and walked out. And people ask about hope. I said, okay, I can live on that for a really long time. And maybe that's it. Maybe we only change the world one person at a time anyway. But yeah, I think those relationships are vital to counteracting a crippling despair, an inability to respond, and cynicism. I've been accused of being a cynic. I don't think I'm a cynic. I think I'm what Reinhold Niebuhr would call a Christian realist. But yeah, I think those relationships are key. I mean, whether that was in El Salvador or the prison system or anywhere else.
And I think it's important to note, I mean, something you said is you have really good reasons for being depressed. The kind of depression you're talking about is one that's born of the circumstances around you that you're unable to change, really. It's not just a purely biological sort of depression that you're dealing with.
Well, also being in Warsaw and having seen the worst of human atrocity, what human beings are capable of. Because we live in Conrad writes about this in Heart of Darkness, or in that great short story, A Short History of Progress. We live in a kind of veneer, but when societies break down, and like Bosnia, and you see what human beings are capable of, it's pretty disturbing. It's hidden from us. It wasn't hidden from Conrad. That's his brilliance, because he was in the Congo watching the colonists. You know, the whole 9 million Congolese dead with King Leopold and everything else. So, and in that sense, that when you come out of that environment back to the United States, you're kind of permanently alienated, because not only do most people not see it, but they don't want to see it.
Yo, what up, y'all? What's going on? You just get a raid? Hey, what up? Yo, nigga. Silver Spook Raid, what's up? What's everyone doing? I've been kind of waffling on this, but you are, in fact, just in time. Took the kids to the fucking go for a hike today. It was alright. Eloise is really interested in like bones. So I like saw like a jawbone on the ground. I was like, oh cool, jawbone. And so she picks it up, and I was like, oh, why are you touching it? Oh no, I didn't know you were gonna touch it. She just fucking picked it up, and it's like, oh god, I'm here to put it, let's put it in this bag. And then Eamon was like looking down at the ground. He's like, oh, there's more of them right here. Pulled it out. It looked like it was a giant fucking femur. Like it looked like a human fucking femur. Like it looked like, like it was a human bone. I'm like scared I'm gonna get picked up for it now. Like the jawbone was like obviously an animal. I could tell. It was like a dog or a deer or something. Maybe a fox. This isn't a kneecap. Not all remixes. It's hard to just put on because like each track is like 4 remixes. It kind of reminds me of like Black Panther. No, like called pigs? Are you kidding me? On myself? There's all kinds of like hobo camps over there too. You know, like little like fucking tarps and stuff. So obviously I didn't want to like blow up their spot. Sometimes you gotta settle the score, you know? That's how they do it. That's how they do it in the hobo world. It was, you know, it was alright. It was just tiring. My legs are fucking killing me. Alright, let's get right into it. I was just looking at like headlines, and this whole one that's like Quebecois, they care more about like you know, coming together to fight Trump. I'm like, yeah, just masterful foreign policy moves.
And as we continue the show here, we want to turn our eyes to the Canadian federal election coming up in just a few days. And we are very, very honored to have here on the show as we continue Amina Sheikh, who's a union organizer, campaign strategist, and the vice president of the Canadian Freelance Union. Amina, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as you know, there's limited information in the United States about the Canadian election, and I think insofar as people here in the US hear about it, it's just that the Liberals are going to do well because people are angry at Trump. And I think the perception is that
Pierre was kicking ass in every poll
Canada's moving in a more
around.
progressive direction vis-a-vis the United States. And I wonder if you think that kind of framing
Silver
is the
linings,
right way
I guess.
for people around the world, but certainly here for our main audience in the US to be looking at this question.
Well, I think it's really important to understand
both parties
that
are moving to the
we've
right
had
there,
a liberal
you know?
regime here for 10 years.
All three
And,
of them,
you know, before that, whether it's conservative or liberal, both of them, if you look through their policies and platforms, share a lot of the same policies and platforms. I do think that with Mark Carney coming in,
True?
I think
They
he
keep
created
voting
a
for the
little bit of
Liberal
buzz
Party,
earlier
and the
on,
Liberal Party
but
is
last night,
conservative.
looking at the polls, it's not looking great in my opinion. It's quite tight between the Liberals and Conservatives,
What happened?
and I don't know.
What did I
Pierre
do?
Poilievre sort of showed up in the
Shit. Hold on, sorry.
And as we continue the show here, people are angry at Trump, and I think the perception is that means that Canada's moving in a more progressive direction vis-a-vis the United States. And I wonder if you think that kind of framing is the right way for people around the world, but certainly here for our main audience in the US to be looking at this question.
Well, I think it's really important to understand that we've had a liberal regime here for 10 years. And, you know, before that, whether it's conservative or liberal, both of them, if you look through their policies and platforms, share a lot of the same policies and platforms. I do think that with Mark Carney coming in, I think he created a little bit of buzz earlier on, but last night, looking at the polls, it's not looking great in my opinion. It's quite tight between the
at least he
Liberals
was
and
on Nardwuar.
Conservatives, and I don't know. Pierre Poilievre sort of showed up in the scene during the pandemic. Who knows what can happen over the next week? I am worried, but I think both governments have.
He was just doing a very Trumpian thing, right? Just like a Canadian brand of it. So he kind of took a hurting, you know, when Trump came in and was so explicitly adversarial to Canada, and really hurt Pierre. I don't know. He might still win. Who knows? Like Mark Carney's like a fucking banker, you know? Which, you know, is the exact opposite. You know, it's like nominating Kamala, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. He's like, I feel like he's just as corrupt, and he's got even less ideas how to respond. You know, there's not a whole lot of good choices. It's gonna be close though. I think Pierre was gonna walk away with it until fucking Trump started talking shit. Now it's toss up, right? I mean, I don't know about that, man. I mean, it's unclear this new sort of like brand of the Republican, like pro-working class. I know Pierre talks about that, but he seems to be mostly just like, melee, like, Bitcoin scams and shit. But then the liberals is like couldn't get much more like the idea of like the like financialized like global capitalist.
She's nutty in relations to my station.
Look at Dremzel. Yeah.
That's the deal. Secrets were revealed because they knew each other.
You know what I mean? Like,
before.
he like ran the Bank of Canada for a while, right? It's like two really bad choices there, Which again that's what they're doing to us now, right? They can't have any democracy. We just got to give us two really shitty candidates, and it doesn't matter who wins. That's what we get, It's what we had, like, like France had like a left-wing option on their ballot, and they actually won. So they got to prevent that from happening. You can't actually give people a left-wing choice because they might fucking vote for it. Dremzel, 37 months puts you all to shame. Dude, I said I was gonna do a 3-year subscriber badge too, didn't I? I topped out at a year, huh? I could probably do that pretty easily. Yeah, exactly. He just says the same shit. Like, he doesn't, again, they're all selling the same basic product. They're just putting it in different wrappers, It's like the capitalist elites run the fucking world. It's just like different countries have different local contexts, so they put different stooges in place, but they are all, they're all just gonna do what they say, right? Yeah. Oh, this fucking guy! Yo! Dude! Look at this dude. 20 gifties. Oh, I needed that, dude. It's been a slow fucking week around here. Oh. Dude, all the unelectable short sellers have been kicking me in the ass. They're doing a pump and dump on my my existence. Dude, you got new chatter, got new member 1, Green Gammon, Nemesis Warlock, Wine Hoarder, Mono Gate Tete, John Coons, H. Jorthuth, it reminds me of Lord Jareth, Lesbian Hot Sauce, Path Test, Meeple Grill, Mechanical Mammoth, Waxing Philosophical, Clova, Elias the Crafter, Kalmalama, Goffing Prohibited, Rewardian, Jesco White, and Silver Spook. Dude, hell yeah. That was huge. Thank you so much. Yeah, really. Chatter's escaping austerity. I need to figure out where that is exactly. But who's also, still on Swift. A game? Oh, I don't really game. I mean, Polymarket winnings? I don't know, you really think Pierre's gonna win? I don't know, people are mad at the liberals, but they're also madder, they seem to be madder at Trump. I mean, I don't live up there, but I don't ever remember this much, organized, coordinated anti-American sentiment in Canada, like booing at hockey games and shit. I don't remember anything like that before, and that seems to be pretty universal, but then again, Mark Carney's a fucking, BlackRock banker, so it doesn't, anything could happen. Fucking jag meat. I wish we had a fucking jag meat. Honorary Yakubi in 1488. I don't know if I want to click on your link, dude.
Similar policies and similar platforms, and I think that's important for the audience to understand.
Yeah, right?
No, I
That's
think
the
that's
thing about
really
it,
important,
right?
and maybe to talk more about that.
I don't know. I usually don't like Kedges too much, but that's why I let that interview play, because it came on and auto-played earlier when I was playing FIFA, and I didn't want to get up and turn it off. He said something that made a lot of sense, like our election was, the oligarchs versus the capital, the corporatists, right? It's basically like, it's kind of sort of what this one is, but it's a little, it's a little less clear, right? But, corporatists like stability, right? They have like long-term extractive industries they're in. The oligarchs are just trying to fucking, they do rentier shit, so it doesn't really matter, right? They just want to prevent like any functional government, right? It's like they got to have any like government responsibility is privatized, and the few things that the government does do are so shitty that everybody is ready to privatize them. That seems, that's the only idea they have, and it's proven just a disastrous idea since they've been doing it, right? Since the 80s. Every single time it's been done, it's just created like less effective infrastructure, less effective government, and at a higher cost, right? Doesn't, like, these things the government does, they do because they're loss leaders, they do them because that's what living in a society is. You collectively pool your resources and you put a little bit into making sure the shit is stable. That's, used to be something that they cared about, but now they don't give a fuck, which is funny because you see fucking Musk talking about like the birth rates and shit, and it's like, are you, like, I know he's high, but like, dude, how high are you, right? Like, it's easier to prevent, like, you don't need to worry about birth rates if you can just like keep people alive, right? Like, you get a healthy workforce. One of the things about Medicare for All is like how much lost productivity we have from people not having healthcare. People like didn't have all these chronic illnesses and like no way to treat them. They'd be more productive at work. There'd be less sick days, etc. I mean, look, dude, if I had any, because it's like, look what Trump's doing, right? Look what Milei did. They promise they're gonna like shake things up, but they mostly just make people's lives worse, so shareholders make a little bit more money, right? Like, that's the thing. It's just that the liberals have failed every country so many times that people are just like sick of dealing with them. So they're desperate. They're willing to try anything, So you have these like, these like anti-deep state types, right? Who are like, oh, that's all fucking corruption. No, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. And then they just slash and burn. They don't actually fix anything at all. They just make everything worse. These fucking Bitcoin scams, these meme coin scams should fucking certainly, in a functional society, they would have been outlawed years ago. But like every chain of communication that we have, like every system that you could get the word out about it is just completely fucking bought and paid for, right? So it's like there's nobody to like tell you how to not get ripped off, because they're all just ripping you off, you know? Yeah, also the fact that the employers wouldn't have the health plan, right? Another one of the reasons why they are fucking, you know, offshoring jobs, because they don't have to pay for healthcare for workers in foreign countries.
I mean, I've seen a number of things being thrown out there. I mean, you know, Mark Carney is essentially saying that, you know, Canada will replace the United States as the leader of the free trade regime. You know, the sort of third party, if you will, the NDP, I think was saying that they need to build their own
Yeah, I know. Like, I think a lot of the you know, the new Trump people are, you know, more into the explicit authoritarian stuff. But I think people everywhere are just desperate and they want something different, and they've been giving no options. They've been giving nothing, you know? They're just willing to try anything new, anything different. Like, it's just, you know, they know what the liberals are going to do. It's like, you know, the devil you don't know, I guess.
F-35. So it almost feels like the policies of the two parties are sort of like one party kind of saying they're going to kind of ape the imperialism of the U.S. Democrats that we had the past 4 years, and the other major party saying we're going to ape what the Republicans are doing under Trump. And then you have the third sort of supposedly more progressive party kind of, you know, following in on the same line. So, I mean, give us a sense of what the parties are really proposing and how that fits in.
Every night.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right when you're saying that. All three parties support militarism abroad. We know since the pandemic that the ongoing war in Europe is completely unpopular with people. However, all three parties have been committed to NATO, committed to militarism. And yeah, you're right. With Trump coming in, I think they're like almost competing in this new rise of Canadian chauvinism and Canadian nationalism. That's not good, actually. And it's whether it's a conservative or whether it's a liberal, you can't tell the difference in many cases here. And under the liberal government, we saw large spending towards the conflict in Ukraine. And Zelensky toured through here. If the audience remembers,
that's why they can't give us a pick against it, because everybody would pick it.
Gave a standing ovation, not we, but our governments gave a standing ovation to a Nazi veteran. I mean, this is Canada.
I mean, that's one of the least bad things that
this is Canada under a liberal hegemony. So for me, I would argue as a union organizer and a trade unionist that for us, workers and the working class, it doesn't really make a difference. You can let
every Nazi come in and give a speech in Parliament if they stop giving money to Nazis today.
It's a little worrisome because of his history of platforming right-wing organizations here and right-wing groups, whether it be Sons of Odin, JDL,
Sons of Odin,
like Shaw monarchist supporters, Hindutva. The list is very long. He's been doing debates and going on Jordan Peterson. So I think with Poilievre, it's a little scary because he's so openly racist and has an affinity and gives a lot of space to right-wing organizations that have been mobilizing here since the pandemic in Canada. But I think with Trudeau, well, now Carney, I think it's worrisome too because he's a former banker.
Yes. Major, head of the Bank of England, which in and of itself says something about Canada and its relationship to colonialism. But, you know, I'm glad you actually made that point about this is Canada, because I think, you know, and you've traveled widely across the United States. You know everything about the political culture here. You know, the perception is like Canada is like Cuba or something, you know what I'm saying? Like it's like a socialist paradise, and I don't know, maybe in comparison to the United States, that's a pretty low bar to raise on some of the important things like healthcare and other issues. But I do think that, I mean, there's a lot of similarities in how the countries were founded, how they developed, the history of genocide and Native Americans. So I mean, I just wonder how, as a Canadian, you feel about that narrative that I think is so often placed on Canada here in the United States. Like this is like the progressive future that we should aspire to.
Again, it's precisely what you said. I think Americans have a misunderstanding because of mainstream media and because of Canada's national image and Canada's idea.
That's what they have to do to keep us from like asking for fucking a few more crumbs. You know, it's like they have to present even any kind of like basic government services like fucking Cuba.
Which is a fake constructed idea.
They don't tell you is like all these European nations, all these Western allies have significantly more state ownership than, you know, Venezuela, for instance.
It's a colonial idea that it's some benevolent nation with a welfare state. We don't have a welfare state. We have a eroding public services and public infrastructure that since the 1970s, like many countries under austerity, you know, we've made cuts into every single public service, and we've bought and sold a lot of our essential services. So Canada is just like the United States in many regards. We have a cost of living crisis, we have inflation, we have a housing crisis, and we have people that are disgruntled.
I feel like that basic premise needs to sink in with everybody, is that like they can't be trusted to do anything unless they're fucking forced to under great penalty of you know, great pain, right? Like you can't, like, you know, if somebody comes into power, like if their pitch is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna work out arrangements with all these guys and it's gonna be great, you know, like, no, right? That they don't do what they say. They fucking, like, they're under an obligation to their shareholders to not do that, you know, like they are going to do in every situation. They are going to extract the maximum legally permissible and then some, right? Legally permissible basically means like enforceable, right? Like they're gonna take what they can get away with every single time. Like they need to be regulated. You see, it's like that's the difference between China and the West. Like it's, people talk about like communism and all. It's like yeah, but like what that actually means is their understanding that like the well-being of their people comes before the profits of these fucking billionaire companies, right? That's actually really not that important, you know. What is important is like people's quality of life, you know, like obviously. And I think if you ask most people, they would say the same thing. It's just they fucking, you know, they do a number on us, making people, you know, miss that fact. You know, like if you don't do that, if you're not willing to step in and like limit how much they're able to fuck you, they're going to fuck you really hard. And we have historical record to show that, right? There's no exceptions, right? There's not anything where, you know, they just like, you know, they agreed to not be awful to workers, right? Like you need to heavily regulate them. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how much it matters. It's all, you know, optics.
And upset, and I think all three parties give the same, you know, words and platitudes, and even the Conservative Party plays as a working class party,
or 50?
But we know it's not. All of them are invested and ready to do extraction at any cost, and extraction and natural resource, what's the word? Search for all the natural resources they can, and off the back of workers. I mean, you see the conversations around the Arctic. You would think that we're still in the 1800s, right? But like, it's the colonizer in us has not gone away. And you did bring up, like, our past is not really our past. You know, residential schools were only closed in the 1990s. We still have that legacy.
He is incredibly mild compared to the Republican Party.
You know, you're a trade union organizer. You're talking to workers on a regular basis. How is just the average working class person relating to the election? Are people checked out? Are they worried? Are they excited? And maybe more importantly, what are the things that, in a perfect world, workers really would like to see the next Canadian government address?
I think what you're going to see, like we saw in the US or like we're seeing in other, NATO countries, is people, pundits and strategists saying people are apathetic. People are apathetic.
That's what they want.
People are strategic voting. Here that means voting for the liberals. People are actually not going to go out to vote. That's what's going to happen. And so it's going to be split between the liberals and the conservatives. And it's not apathy, it's agitation. Ordinary people, when we knock on doors, we know they're agitated, they're angry, they're fed up with the system. They're looking for alternative solutions, and they're looking for it and they can't find it because none of the parties have provided them with that. And here with the Social Democrat Party, whether they've governed provincially, whether they've governed federally in the past, their history too has been a commitment to industry, to extraction, to austerity. And really,
for no reason,
all three parties have a reputation of not doing anything for ordinary people. So I think people are just fed up, and I don't think people are going to turn out to vote in large numbers. And I think what we're going to see is a serious setback for communities and people. People are already struggling.
What do you want to cap immigration
I don't know
for?
what's going to happen in the next few years, but I think the outcome will be the same regardless of the liberals or the conservatives.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it brings me to another question. I mean, certainly, Canada's known for having a strong trade union movement. You've seen there's been a huge upsurge of solidarity with Palestine all across the country, including the largest march for Palestine in the history of Canada in Ottawa. So social movements and popular movements don't seem to just be, rolling over and dying, as it were. So, I mean, give us a sense of that as well. What's happening in terms of the real grassroots organizing that I assume will have to continue regardless of who wins.
I think what's awesome about Canada is that we have a history of Indigenous land defenders who have united with Palestinian organizers, community organizers. There's been rent strikes here in Canada. There's been tenant...
Like we've seen down here, right? Like you can't let the capitalists control the media, right? Like it's not a healthy media environment. I don't think anybody can really say that it is. Corporate media is just completely captured. Just look at the coverage of like any number of foreign interventions, and just like the way they cover even just like horse race politics, right? Like they just shill for the oligarchs and like fucking defend war crimes and any amount of fucking brutality. Like they just push this tribalism, this like red versus blue shit that is really not helpful. It's like they are responsible for like legitimizing so much of our world is the way it is because the media says it is. Right? Politicians can change the rules and shit, but the media is the one who like tells people how the world is. That's what makes reality. I see it all the time with like UFOs, especially, right? It's like the way they cover it. It's like any other issue, right? You would see people would be up in arms screaming about this, but the media like doesn't treat it that way, so people like don't think about it that way, right? But again, trust me, dude, anybody like who's not overtly like being like captured by like some fucking like capitalist industry is good, right? Like anybody at all, you see, it's like every single outlet we have here is all gonna or we don't have any media at all, or that, right? We have a handful of like like outlets that are associated, tied to giant corporate, multinational corporations, right? And who are basically loss leaders, right? That's what's the thing that's really accelerated the destruction of our economy in the last few years. Is just the financialization, the way that these guys are, and the fact that they get bailed out whenever they fuck up, right? Whenever there's a huge fucking, L, they always get bailed out. Doesn't matter how small they are. Like that stupid Silicon Valley bank got bailed out so they could just make risky investments. That's what it is. They just make riskier and riskier and shittier investments, knowing the government's going to backstop them. Trump gave fucking $45 trillion to these large multinational banks during his first term, right? And it wasn't even in the news. That's what Obama changed after 2008, right? They can, anytime they need liquidity, the government can just put money in the back door and shore them up. So they just keep making awful investments, and it ends up being that, like, they don't make as much profit doing traditional businesses. They can make more profit doing scammy financing, like assets, like that's what they do, selling weapons or, doing fucking pump and dumps and shit. And then, Trump and Elon turned the entire global economy into a massive pump and dump scheme. That's what these guys do. They don't put their money into a business and leave it there and let the business, make a few % profit every year. They know it doesn't matter if they lose, so they just put money into fucking, horrible stuff. Like, and it drives inflation, right? Because they're constantly shutting down their actual industrial, like food processing plants and warehouses and like all that shit. It just rapidly shutting down. Yeah, on social media platforms, local media platforms. And just a handful of guys who own fucking everything now. At this stage, the way that they trick you is like we're saying, right? Like, I don't know. I'm still optimistic though, right? Because it's shittier than it's ever been, but like a lot more people, have got a beat on what's going on. Starting to figure it out, and like older people too. Plus, like, it's so unstable, it's not gonna last, right? Like, even with all the way that they control the the mechanism, like of the levers of global fucking finance, I don't think the future doesn't look bright. And then Trump, this shit with Trump is like like I said, I don't know if he cares really so much. Like, I think they're just doing pump and dump schemes. They're just making money off the daily, up and down of the market, right? Because they can say something and move the market. So they just, in advance, they put their money in a certain way, and then they say something and the market moves and they get rich, right? That's all they're doing. So it's just really bad, then instead of investing in a company, you're investing in that every day. Just like other people's misery. It doesn't have to be this way. That's the other thing. Like, pretending it has to be this way is fucking a huge part of the problem.
And there's organizing around disability justice, there's organizing around equitable and public services like childcare, healthcare. So people are becoming conscious, and people are conscious through this genocide that's happening on Gaza and on Palestinian people. And people realize this too with the ongoing war in Europe. People are wondering why are we transferring this many arms, this much military equipment to kill humanity? When at home, people can't even get food. At home, people can't buy essential services and goods. And they are asking those questions. And those questions are important. And as organizers, we need to agitate, and we need to bring people towards our collective community spaces, towards our unions. And I think that is what's happening. And we're seeing it happening in the United States with young workers knowing what a union is. And not only are people knowing what a union is, they're going to their union space and saying, we need to divest. We need to divest from militarism, and we need to divest from policing. It's unacceptable. And the same type of policing that's going on inside our communities against Black and Indigenous people and communities is the same type of policing and militarism that is used via the Israeli state or through, the war in Ukraine. So people are really organizing around that, and they're not letting go. And we are seeing during this election the question around demilitarization, disarmament, and the peace movement is back.
Well, that last part is certainly heartening to hear. A lot to see, a lot to follow. Going to be interesting to see what happens here in the next election, but we'll keep following it. Amina Sheikh, thank you so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
On the Freedom Side. On the Freedom Side.
Sam Cedar, Emma Vigeland, Majority Report. Pleasure to welcome back to the program Crystal Ball, co-host of Breaking Points, as well as Crystal Kyle and friends. Crystal, welcome back.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you.
So it's just, this story just broke this morning that a county judge in Wisconsin was arrested by the FBI for allegedly...
That's like nakedly authoritarian. Like
protecting an
obvious.
Immigrant in her
not a lot of gray area
courthouse. Now,
can't fucking lock up a judge because they don't
it has been very
rule how you
controversial,
want.
or at least it certainly was 8 years ago. The idea of not arresting immigrants, undocumented immigrants, or anybody else for that matter, in like courthouses. There's been a couple of places because you want people to be able to go to courthouses.
Yeah.
There is a societal interest. I mean, this is why we have, why we give undocumented in some states licenses. This is why we don't allow local police in many places to engage in immigration sweeps, because if you have a portion of your population that is not participating in things like reporting a fire or reporting a crime or going in and adjudicating something, your society is starting to break down a little bit. But arresting a judge seems maybe like an important moment.
Yeah, it's a significant escalation. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I don't know if you guys probably saw this footage that came out of a courtroom in Charlottesville, Virginia, where an immigrant had just actually had his charges dropped. And then agents of the state who would not identify themselves, would not show a warrant, one of whom was fully masked, apprehended him and pulled him out, even as his lawyers and other bystanders are trying to protect him, trying to say, who are you with? What's your name? What's your badge number? And so those sorts of things have been playing out around the country. And we don't know all the details here yet. But I mean, one thing that was interesting to note is that the FBI director, Kash Patel, he's the one who originally posted this tweet saying that they had arrested this judge. He then deleted the tweet. So not sure what is going on there. But, zooming out, I've been saying, and this won't be any surprise to you guys, as Trump becomes less popular, we're going to enter an even more dangerous phase of this presidency. Because rather than, being able to try to garner any sort of public political support, he's going to have to engage in increasingly ever more authoritarian and fascistic tactics. And I think this could be seen as part of that ramping up. And it's not an accident that it comes as his poll numbers across the board, including on things like immigration, really fall.
Yeah, and also I think it's a way to send a message to immigration judges too, or not immigration judges, but judges across the country, I should say. And it doesn't have to just be limited to immigration, but this is how the mafia operates, right? Where they're intimidating this woman, this judge in Wisconsin, and they're trying to make an example out of her so that other judges across the country are maybe a little bit more favorable to the administration, because that's basically where the only thing that has the brakes on this administration so far has been the court system and the judiciary.
Yeah. And, there was one piece of good news. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Trump administration has just been mass canceling the immigration status of foreign students. And they were facing an overwhelming onslaught, some 50 plus lawsuits across the country that they were just losing one after another after another. And they actually backed down on that and are reinstating the status of these foreign students. So you're absolutely right that even though they've been willing to, outright defy the courts, to, misinterpret what the Supreme Court is saying, what district court judges are saying, et cetera, it still is the only place where you've had a sort of meaningful, organized resistance. And it was interesting to me. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read the Time Magazine interview with Trump, which was all over the map. But they asked him about the Supreme Court unanimous decision with regard to, hey, you got to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And Trump, first of all, claimed that his people, didn't tell him that ruling went against him. But he wanted to make it clear that he did not want to defy the Supreme Court. Now, in reality, they are defying the Supreme Court. But it's at least interesting to me that he doesn't want to be seen as brazenly, directly defying the Supreme Court, and at least wants to put some rhetorical flourish on the direction they're going in.
I believe him that they didn't tell. We saw there was footage that came out with Stephen Miller. Was like,
Stephen Miller,
won
yeah.
hands down, and I'm not convinced that wasn't the first time that he heard that. But I think what is really clear that and I think the poll numbers are part of this. We should say that I think it's the first time that he is net negative now on immigration, only by a point or two. He's net negative
every other
by
issue.
Dozens of points on just about every other issue. Well into the teens in a lot of this, and sometimes even further net negative. But I think what we're going to start to see is the pace and the ambition
I think I saw
of different
the one
parts of
where he talked about his financial arrangement
overall
with TYK,
agenda
right?
move at a different pace and start. And there's going to be, it's unclear to me, it's quite obvious that Stephen Miller, and I think you can see that in the context of the Hegseth signal chat, or maybe the first one with the First Atlantic, where it's Miller comes in and he's the guy who has the last word.
He's the voice of the president.
On attacking Yemen.
Yeah.
Right? That's sort of outside of his portfolio. Granted, they're not, white people that we're attacking, so maybe that's why he has a say in that.
Yeah, his portfolio is just evil doing.
Evil doing against
evil doing. That's
non-white
Stephen
people.
Miller.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think we're going to start to see different agendas in how they're represented by different people within the Trump administration, because Trump is quite clearly just he's so far removed from all of this, it seems to me, at this point.
I think the only area that I would say he's not far removed from is the tariffs. That seems to be the part that
totally
that's what he's into. He's making these insane decisions. He's inventing calls that he didn't even have with the Chinese leadership. I think that's all him. But I think you're right.
200 deals on the
That's
table.
right, 200 deals. What could you tell us about any of them? No. No.
Cenk and Hannah were whining about the Larry David bit.
I should also announce that I personally have made 300 tariff deals.
Wow,
but,
congratulations,
It's because
man.
they want to get
I took that
invited to Mar-a-Lago.
with President Xi. He's doing great, and we also made roughly 3,000 deals together.
See how China came out and
who the
said
deals are.
there's no negotiations going on. Trump said that, but that's not true. We're not negotiating at all. He's an asshole. It was pretty cool.
You revealed too much.
You're learning. But I do think that we're going to start to see that, because the Doge stuff has now it seems to me fallen away, and they've fallen back to their sort of Alamo position, which is the Russell vote mechanism of destroying the administrative state.
Yeah, it's I feel like people have the wrong idea. When we eventually take over Canada, it's going to be like an Anschluss thing, right? It's going to be like Germany and Austria, They're going to frame it like it's, we're just fucking coming together. And then I imagine they'll probably do something with Mexico eventually too, right? Maybe all at once.
It's all, we had someone on the other day who was former Doge, and just because she was with the U.S. Digital Services, and she said this next wave is all RIF stuff, reduction in force, which actually is a mechanism rather than the Doge, which would just go in and fire people.
Yeah, and hack into systems and
exactly.
that sort of thing. Yeah,
and which is not to say that it's any better. In some ways, it's even worse because it's like they've mapped this out of how they're going to do it from a legal standpoint. But it feels like the tariff stuff, like you say, is Trump's baby, but it's fallen apart for him now. Like it's as if Peter Navarro didn't know what he was talking about. But he's getting warnings now. Like I have there's a half a dozen stories that are out there today of like he was surprised that all these shipping containers from China basically they're not sending stuff. Like they decided it's just not worth it.
Right.
Whereas
well, did you see?
I'm trying to do a one world government here.
Did you see the Jeff Stein report that now they're meeting about these rare earth metals?
Yes.
They're like, oh shit, like China cut those off. That was the most obvious. The most obvious tactic China would take. It's like, you didn't think about this? This didn't occur to you before now?
Such a fucking moron,
I mean, not that surprises me because all of this attempt to sane-wash him or, actually, you don't understand the grand plan and the 4D chess and the treasury bonds and the de-dollarization. We're going to use a stable coin to, be able to prop up the dollar, whatever.
Oh, my God. That's such a
That
bad...
was not what's going on. Trump likes tariffs because he likes power. He likes to be put in the position of having these people come to him and have to ask for what they want and him being able to bully him. He likes that. And so that's what he likes about tariffs. Now, I think other people in the administration had different ideas of what this was going to be about, whether it's, we're going to bring the manufacturing jobs back, whether it's, we're going to try to get the treasury yields down, which that completely and utterly failed. There were some Chamber of Commerce types that were like, we're going to use the threat of tariffs to actually get to 0% tariffs, which, is like, okay, well, then you could have just stayed in TPP, I guess, if that was ultimately your goal. But for Trump, I think it really comes down to vibes and control and power. And I also think that truly the connective tissue, and this gets to, some of the comments in the Democratic Party about oligarchy, et cetera, truly the connective tissue between all of these things is just an all-out assault on the working class. Tariffs are deeply regressive. They've been feeding insider info to close, Wall Street executives, et cetera, who can benefit from these massive market movements.
He made $2 billion
They're going to give a huge
the other
tax
day.
cut to the rich. Doge is all about destroying the government's ability to regulate so that business can treat workers however the hell they want, and so that you have no access to social safety net benefit programs, even if you technically are entitled to them. So, that to me is the most cohesive way of understanding an actual project here.
And the tariffs also, I think you're right that it's about him consolidating power and also wanting people to come to him so he can be the deal maker. But there's also the insane, almost conservative ideological thing that might be behind it, where he may be getting some backing from Looney Tune, like gold standard conservatives, like who think this is a way to basically eliminate the income tax.
Right.
That's a way that he talks about.
Right.
But he talks about McKinley and this era as a time waxing poetically about how there was no income tax at this time and how tariffs could be replacing that. I mean, that's not going to happen,
dude.
right? Obviously, but I do think he thinks that way.
They're so fucking selfish.
Not only was there no income tax,
so rapacious,
there was
man.
next to no labor regulation at that time. If people who want to champion this policy, like the Batias of the world, want to evoke images of the 1953, the peak of post-war manufacturing in America, when these were good, regulated union jobs by and large. Trump's not saying that. Trump's saying, hey, let's go back to the turn of the century when we didn't have child labor laws to deal with, when, people, it was much more of a Dickensian type atmosphere. You're talking Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, you're talking Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, you're talking extremely low wages, extremely dangerous, extremely dirty. These were not good jobs. Trump wants to put American workers back in this, sweatshop era race to the bottom.
So bizarre.
He's not looking to, clearly,
just
to rebuild some sort of working
man?
Class power.
Like,
quite the opposite. And in that way, his interests with this tariffs are quite aligned with the interests of whether it's Elon Musk or any of the other, favorite oligarchs.
Your legacy or anything?
It really also
not
does feel like they did not understand the dynamic.
And
between...
Musk too. It's like Musk fucking voluntarily puts his name on all of this awful austerity, and whatever happens, that's going to be blamed on Musk. The failure of government services will be blamed on Doge, right? They just gave the Democrats a boogeyman to run against forever. Be like, oh, fucking Doge fucked you. I'm gonna undoge you. I'm gonna do good Doge. Yeah, he closed the fucking, the sanitariums too. Which, that was a big deal. He's deloused in the sanitarium.
in China enough. I mean, it's as if like it never occurred to them, say like, what percentage of their exports are coming here, and that they didn't occur to them like they might be able to make up that 12% other places. Like they can play
I hope to
hardball
one
with
day
us.
die in a
I mean, on
poorhouse.
some level,
Exactly.
it feels like Iraq, in many ways, the Iraq invasion and occupation, the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq, revealed the United States in many respects as a paper tiger. And it feels like this moment.
Who you calling paper tiger?
With the tariffs, regardless of if we go back to what the status quo was 6 months ago, is also now
never gonna
revealed
happen, dude.
the sort of like that there's a bit of a, from an
Everyone
economic
knows how
standpoint, we're a bit
fucking-
of a paper tiger because, you know, the idea of apparently like Bloomberg reported that American meat exports, there was 12,000 metric tons of U.S. pork was ordered by Chinese. They canceled it.
Whoa.
And, you know,
they
our
pork
system
over
is
there,
just
huh?
not prepared to absorb, like, who do we sell to? And I think, like,
Australia doesn't want our meat. That's the thing that they were upset about, and it's because they have plenty of cattle and beef, and also it's more regulated, so it's safer. So they don't want our dirty meat.
Well, I would say too that you know, a preview of this was when we threw
about
the entire
Australia, but-
economic sanctions playbook at Russia, thinking that would cause, you know, severe economic contraction and potentially regime
I think they
collapse
feed different
within
feed
Russia.
in UK,
And
right?
you know, not going to say that it was nothing
I don't like
for
the
them,
taste of meat over
but
there.
they were able to sustain that, to withstand
Tastes
that
like grass.
far better
like
than
scotch.
most economists, but than any economist I saw expected. And you know, part of that is that Russia and China and the BRICS coalition in general, but specifically those two nations, they have recognized that their dependence on the U.S. and on, you know, our financial and banking system and these sorts of things, that this was a
I'm sure
vulnerability for them. So they've been preparing.
it's like,
So China also had a little bit. I think
right?
we threw all of
Like we have no regulations around GMOs, so our shit tastes good, but like it's growing tumors in all of your organs or whatever. You know, it's like calcifying your fucking liver.
that Russia, this incredible sanctions regime that also helped them to game out what this could potentially look like for them.
and apparently, according to Financial Times, Beijing basically said
They
you got to
feed the
cancel all
cows,
your
like,
unilateral
fucking sugar
tariff
water or
measures
whatever,
before
right?
we even engage in trade talks. Like, I mean, they're basically saying we're not sitting down with you unless you go back to zero. You know,
I mean,
it
I'm
is.
just saying.
I've
I've only been to Europe, but I think our meat tastes
if
better
Trump,
than theirs.
I think
but
there's probably
I
like a
think,
3-week window.
You know, that's
that we're
because
already
of the
going to see
feed.
some type of
Like they feed their stuff like healthy stuff that cows actually like to eat, and we feed them like some processed like wheat paste thing. You know, it's like gluten paste or some shit, right? So our cows taste like fucking, you know, pastries, and their cows taste like, you know, cows.
You're going to see the implications of this within 2 or 3 weeks, right? Like, the however long
They
the
feed them
supply
Soylent Green.
line sort of cycle was, however much slack there was in there, that's going to run out, and I think that's like basically the timeline.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do reverse by then, it's just going to get worse and worse for him, and for frankly, farmers and other manufacturers, and it's all it's going to be a mess.
And manufacturing jobs, we just saw Intel, and I know that they've had problems for a while, but they're laying off 20% of their workforce. And you're seeing, like, I think it was the Richmond Fed of the 12 Fed districts was projecting incredible losses of manufacturing jobs in particular. So, this is going to have an effect,
so,
and people are going to feel that in real life. As Trump says, this is about bringing manufacturing back. And I wonder what the political implications are of that, just because Trump has he has a high floor. Like, I don't know if he gets down to 17% disapproval ever or something like that, because he has this cult following. But maybe that's what does it, right? When we start to lose jobs and if the economy really gets into a deep recession. I don't know what you think about that, Crystal. But.
I really don't know. To me, it's still an open question, because I think you're right to say we can't project what we've seen in the past about how high his floor is into this administration, because this administration is qualitatively different than what we saw in Trump 1.0. And also, you know, typically when leaders face some sort of a crisis and they
it's
have to
got,
manage
like, a
it
weird
and it goes well or it
aftertaste,
goes poorly,
British beef.
usually there was some sort of an external
Irish beef,
factor that at
too.
least contributed to that crisis. The fact that this is wholly,
I mean, you know what? I'm
100%
saying that, like, I don't know where the beef was from when I was there, but it all seemed to have the same weird taste. So I assumed it was something to do with the feed, you know? Maybe it's not grass. Whatever the fuck they feed them, I think it tastes weird.
100% self-generated is really an extraordinary thing. And Sam is exactly right. I've been digging into this like transport and logistics Twitter, like these guys that follow the trucking industry or that manage the ports and these sorts of things. And apparently, it takes about 30 days to get cargo from China to LA. That'll be the port where you first start to really see things hit. And then it's about 45 days
like
to Houston
burgers,
and then other places.
like regular
the timing's
things,
a little
you
bit
know?
different. But we're coming up on that. Now, one
Like
thing
the
I'll say
pub
is that
burgers,
some of these businesses
something.
anticipated, they knew some sort of tariff regime was coming.
McDonald's
they
is
increased
better
their
there. I'll
inventory.
say that, dude. Yeah, McDonald's is fucking better there. That's for sure. But like the average burger you get at a fucking bar kind of sucks, Whereas the average burger you get at a bar here is one of the greatest meals in the world, right? Usually, it's a fucking cheeseburger and fries from the bar is gonna be like a quality meal basically at any bar. 95% of the bars in the country. It's like, I don't know. Whatever explains that,
Anticipation of that, so that will in the near term give them a little bit more wiggle room and a little bit more flexibility. But even if he completely walks back now, which is not happening
McDonald's
yet, even if he completely
poison
walks
though.
away now, I think there's going to be a tremendous impact. We all saw the way in COVID, you can't just snap your fingers and have
That's
these
what I
things
mean.
go
Things
back to
with
normal.
it's like things with lots of chemicals and fucking bad stuff in it. They taste good, but all of the bad things in it are not good for you. That's the trade-off, But like, it's like, it's like shortening our lifespan. Or
going
whatever.
to be a massive impact from this. You had Walmart and Home Depot and CEOs of these companies
That's
go
what
to
I'm
Trump and
saying.
say, hey, we're a couple weeks from having empty
So it's these plump fucking chemical-fed cows, right? Yeah, exactly. Like they taste good, but they're fucking poisonous.
parts of shelves. Like this is getting very real. And if you're a small business owner, you don't have a cushion. You don't have a cushion. And maybe you thought, okay, maybe he's serious about 10 or 20% tariffs. Here's how I can plan. Here's how I can deal with that. When you get to 145%, like it's over. It's done. There's nothing you can do. There is no way you can withstand that. And so you'll see a number of small business bankruptcies. You'll see them getting wiped out. You're going to see prices going up. Amazon sellers are already hiking their prices now. Like that's what's really wild is we're in this sort of in-between period where we all know it's going to hit and it has not hit yet. And nobody knows exactly how severe that's going to be.
There's that, like, you can see the tide going out, and that's like, this is like with tsunami time, but we just don't know how much you have to run up the beach at this point to get the high ground. I don't know in any other context I would ever even have this thought, but he's so he's so I think like mentally
We do hog the world.
unpredictable. One wonders if, as he's getting hundreds of millions of dollars coming in with this meme coin thing, if he's going to fully sort of be able to wrap his head around or care about the implications of the
tariffs.
Of the tariffs. I mean, if Miller has been effective in shielding him from the idea that he's been basically telling his administration has been telling the Supreme Court, we're just not going to pay attention.
Really?
Building whatever sort of like. I think the Supreme Court at the end of the day wants to do what is consistent with Republican and conservative ideology, but there's still some of that like, wait, we're judges.
Exactly.
Type of
like,
mentality. I wonder if he's not shielded from that. Like, I feel like we're one good critique of Besant away, where if like Navarro gets a line in, like, did you see the shirt he was wearing today? And Besant goes, and then Navarro's back into the Oval Office.
Totally.
And because Musk is gone, I really do think this is sort of like.
So Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller seems like the shadow president, but then Navarro is all over the tariff stuff. But like to that point
Navarro,
in that Time interview, his quote was,
Such
"I
a
love the
moron.
concept of a millionaire tax hike, but it quote may not be acceptable to the public." So like that's the point is that that's how detached from reality he is.
It's like a 95%.
He used to be able to be a very effective crowd surfer, but since he lost the election, he has had no tether to any sane society, to any sense of like liberal New York, even like elites, right? And he's been holed up in Mar-a-Lago, in OANNville. He doesn't even understand that like I know they're not going to do this millionaire tax hike, but you should know that that's a good thing for you politically if that's what you care about.
His view of the public is like the billionaires in his cabinet or whatever. Like that's where he's getting his reading from. He's like, well, they probably won't like it, so we're going to avoid it. I mean, You know, one of the things that I've been thinking about is all of these people are so brain poisoned. They're so like online brain poisoned. And I think one of the qualities of having that particular illness is that everything becomes sort of unreal to you, you know? So like the massive carnage that you are perpetrating on the global economy and small businesses and on workers and what it's going to do to prices, like it feels like nothing is really real, like nothing matters.
Yeah.
You know, that's always what people, nothing really matters.
Nihilistic presidency.
Yeah, and so I think it's that. I think also, you know, in Trump's first term, he did some tariffs, much more limited than what we're talking about.
It's really hard to like apples and oranges trying to compare the British Empire and the American Empire, right? It kind of seems like it's about equal, right? But you know, I don't know. There's that. You ever heard those Indian economists talking about like the opportunity cost of the British colonization? There's stuff like that, right? It's like astronomical figures. I mean, it's arguably worse the way that we do it, though, because it's like the ideological capture and the brain poisoning. Like, these people knew they were being colonized before, right? They were upfront about it. Now it's like these weird fucking, you know, we control the economy and just extract wealth out of their economies and don't give anything back for it, and, you know, like, talk about human rights and shit when we comment on it at all. I was like, people that got, you know, they're mystified, I believe is the Marxist term, right?
Here, but there was an economists were really concerned about what those tariffs were going to do and the price hikes and what would it mean for farmers, et cetera. And they did have negative impacts. I mean, farmers had to be bailed out under Trump 1.0. But I think in his mind, he's like, well, it didn't come to this catastrophic end that everyone predicted. And so I think he just doesn't, you know, he just thinks he can do anything and that it will never have the
what
consequences
I'm saying is it's hard to
that
get
the experts are really predicting. And, you know, this plays into his view of the polls being wrong. And
it's like we kill people with neoliberalism, right? We kill people by like manufactured shortages and famines and whatnot. It's like people die every year because they're not profitable enough to feed, you know? Which, you know, is social murder, right? You're responsible for that person's death if you are, you know, interfering with their economy in such a way that they aren't able to feed themselves. That's like what we did, you know, in the post-war period, was get these developing countries like completely dependent on us, right? We would get them to produce like, you know, local crops so we could drive down the price, you know, and prevent anybody else from getting any kind of market share. So you get them to grow like coconuts or pineapples or whatever the fuck, you know. And then, oh, we'll sell you our rice and, you know, our wheat for super cheap, right? So it's like a loss leader or whatever. You give them a good deal on the wheat, and then they, you know, they agree to not grow it themselves. So then they drive down the price of whatever crop you need, and they're completely dependent on you then, right? Because if you fuck them over, they have a famine. And as a result, like, they have that capability now with a lot of the developing world, the ability to just turn famines on and off. I mean, it's obviously changing, but that's what I mean. I don't know, what is that like? How do you credit that? Is that partial credit, or is that the same as like a British soldier fucking bayoneting somebody? Yeah, and then lying about China and saying China stole it and shit. That's so fucked up. Especially given like the arrangement, like it was very clear at the time what the deal was, right? And they're always accusing them of cheating and stealing, and it's like, we are the only ones who cheat and steal. Like, they every year they produce real evidence of us spying on them or somehow stealing their IP, right? But yet, you know,
those sorts of things. So I do think that plus he's a psychopath, so that doesn't help things. And I think there is just a total disconnect from the actual impacts of his policy. He definitely doesn't care whether or not Republicans win the midterms. I mean, he's not trying to work through Congress. He's doing whatever he wants on his own. So what difference does it make to him whether or not Republicans have control of the House, have control of the Senate? And as I said before, I think you're going to see increasingly authoritarian tactics and police state tactics. And we're already seeing plenty of that, but I think that's going to continue to get ramped up as his
like in the Congo, right, where it's like Gulf states backing the genocide. We're indirectly, doing it, right?
Popularity slips, and there's more and more need for him to crush dissent and assert total control and dominance.
I mean, I think just to expand on what you're saying, like I think I wonder if part of what drives him on the tariff front is that Biden maintained those tariffs, and in some places, whether it was through like the CHIPS Act or the IRA,
really
expanded
more
on
like
them.
the Fourth Reich. No?
He needs to sort of like, I'm going to be more than Biden. And then on the flip side, in terms of what we're going to see in terms of authoritarianism, like in Trump 1.0, it felt like whenever there was any type of scandal, and there was a ton of scandals in that first term. I wonder if people remember how many people had to resign even by this point. I think it was like 3 or 4, 5 resignations.
Frank Priebus barely lasted a month or two.
But like the guy from Oklahoma was at the EPA was already talking about using like his I mean there was multiple people who had to be jettisoned. They're not going to jettison anybody. They're basically in for, I think, Hegseth could literally be projecting war plans, on a screen on the Pentagon.
They had the entire world by the balls, and they fucking
in that iteration of the Trump administration,
destroyed it
they
in
immediately
generation.
went to attacking a black person. Like it was like, I mean, I can't remember like all the different. There was like a half a dozen, whether it was, the squad members, whether it was Kaepernick. I mean, there were so many. And I think they're going to use immigrants in that same way this time.
Yeah.
And I think they're hoping with that's going to be their elixir,
but like,
I guess, to get out of,
I don't
know, a bad news cycle.
But see, they went too far with that too. So now I think they're not going to have any sympathy trying to do that, right? Because I think people, by and large, like you saw, they were just commenting on it, right? Like Trump is now underwater on immigration too, right? It's going to be harder to demonize them after you unjustly kick them out of the country like that, like over and over again. Like, the student thing, I mean, that is like, I mean, it's like they're doing that kind of stuff because they don't want, like rich foreigners coming to college here, right? Because it's like makes it less competitive for their kids, I guess. Which is so short-sighted. I mean, goddamn. Oh. And at the same time, you have like all science being defunded and like capital increasingly resistant to invest anything in any science at all. Really fucking.
Well,
Miller's perspective.
He thinks his biggest mistake in the first term was like ever listening to anyone about anything. Yeah, I mean, that's what in the off season while they were out of office,
the U.S. is an
the
oligarchy.
whole plan was,
Every
okay, whatever guardrails were in place last time, we need to make damn sure none of those exist this time around. And this is actually a core sort of MAGA movement.
Famous guardrail
is
hater.
that the problem with Trump 1.0 was that you had, John McCain there to give the thumbs down on the healthcare. You had people like Jared Kushner, Mark Milley, or the Deep State, or Esper to rein him in when he says, hey, let's shoot protesters in the knees. Like, that is their assessment of what went wrong in Trump 1.0. So they took a very intentional, that's part of what Project 2025 was, very intentional effort to make sure that whether it's Republicans in Congress, whether it's law firms, whether it's the media, whether it's universities, whether it's the courts, these things are not going to stand in their way this time. And, that's what Schedule F is about as well, making sure you only have loyalist sycophants in place so that this time around, if Trump says, hey, I want to do the Insurrection Act,
I mean, who's going
there's
to go
not
to
going to be
college
anyone
if
there
nowhere
to
to get
say,
a job?
here's why that would be really horrible and you shouldn't do it. And, that's what we've seen. You couple that with, of course, the fact that the Supreme Court gave him blanket immunity, more or less, and you have someone who is just completely unhinged, absolute id, and going to go to the most maximalist places he has ever imagined. Just one other note on that. This is a point that Emily Tuschinski, who I work with, made that I thought was astute. which is on the tariff specifically. If you actually wanted to do a real, like, industrial protectionist policy involving tariffs that has some intelligence,
could have done it. Like,
some sort of intellect behind it, you would have brought back Robert Lighthizer. Like, whether you agree with his ideology or not, this is a guy who's thoughtful, knows what he's talking about, could do something that was actually coherent. But you don't go with Lighthizer. Instead, you go with Howard Lutnick and Peter Navarro. And these types, Navarro is a complete ideological crank who, by the way, just got out of prison and so is also in this, like, YOLO burn it all down mode. Lutnick seems to just be a complete idiot. And then you've got Besant there to try to, like, sane wash the whole enterprise. So I thought that was an interesting indication too of even Lighthizer, because he had some level of intellectual independence, even though he was aligned with the stated MAGA
exactly, and they pay
goals,
full price
even he
and
couldn't
they
be
have
brought into this
fucking cash.
administration.
Exactly. That's the thing is, like, they also they understand, like, that the universities are their ideological enemies, right? Even though they're run by investment bankers now, but they want to fuck them. Like, they want to strategically decimate the economy so that, like, just them and their friends are doing things that are profitable and everybody else is, like, fucking struggling with the corrupt regime of laws he puts in place. Right? So they're totally fine fucking over this major revenue source, right, for the colleges. They don't care. Plus, it's all like they have all those, like, credit default swaps and shit based on, like, the fucking unpaid student loans and all.
That's interesting. And I think, again, I think you're right. The number one factor to get hired was how much resistance are you going to put up? Or, am I going to be, are there going to be leaks about this? Which is why we're not seeing those same leaks this time, because they're all just loyalty was just their number one, credential that they needed to get the job. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone.
Here, this becomes more evident. Normally, this fact is subtle, but recently, rather than hiding behind the power of money and lobbying groups, billionaires in the second Trump run show their face openly and seem almost proud of their cozy relationship to state power and their ability to control a so-called democratic government. How did this all start?
The CCP is teaching them how to cheat.
The first billionaires, in the modern sense of the word, start to appear in the early 19th century in the US, during the so-called Gilded Age. Due to the massive and massively uneven economic growth at the time, a small group of people managed to amass extreme wealth. They were very different from the richest members of society before them. They made their money mainly through business and industry, and didn't hold formal titles or political positions, but they had immense wealth, and through that, power. These were known as the robber barons. This was a period of a more blatantly unregulated capitalism, where exploitative business practices such as workers being paid almost nothing, dangerous working conditions, and abuse was routine. Their customers received poor quality products and inflated prices, and were faced with price hikes, collusion, fraud, supply limitations, and more in an effort to drive up prices artificially. They held total monopolies across industries, formed trusts, and bribed politicians into helping them keep their positions. They were also, at the time, absolutely hated by the public. As time went on, political agitation and the international situation forced better conditions at home, but exported the relentless profit-seeking and horrible conditions abroad instead. At home, many billionaires made their way in tech or finance industries, rather than heavy industries. Through the new frontier of internet and tech, they've managed to somewhat improve their image in the public eye. Some people are now even willing to openly support their wealth hoarding. Moving into COVID, well, it devastated most people, but not billionaires. While millions fell into poverty, 573 new billionaires emerged, one every 30 hours. Meanwhile, nearly 8 million people were pushed into extreme poverty at almost the same rate. The clear wealth shift, of course, went unmentioned. Billionaires didn't suddenly become smarter or work harder overnight. Instead, workers slaved away for longer hours, often for lower pay and in worse conditions, while the wealthy manipulated the system to their advantage. Through privatization, monopolies, deregulation, and attacks on workers' rights, they funneled an obscene amount of wealth into their own pockets, often with the backing of governments prioritizing corporate profits over people's well-being. In just 24 months, billionaire wealth grew more than it had in the previous 23 years combined. Before the pandemic, the world's billionaire-controlled wealth was equivalent to 4.4% of global GDP. Now that figure stands at 13.9%. That's a threefold increase. Today, 2,668 billionaires control over $12.7 trillion, which is 3.8 trillion more than in 2020. The 10 richest men alone own more wealth than 40% of humanity combined, about 3.1 billion people. This is the result of a system designed to ensure the rich get richer regardless of what happens to everyone else. Even during economic downturns, billionaires profit. When COVID sent markets into chaos, investors funneled money into corporations deemed too big to fail, further enriching the wealthiest. Government bailouts and relief programs disproportionately benefited them by design, proving once again that under capitalism, crises aren't setbacks for the rich, they're opportunities.
Dude. Oh my god.
Now, who are they? Billionaires are not a distinct class. They are a small and far richer portion of the bourgeoisie, the owning class, the capitalist class. Their relationship to production and how they make their money is fundamentally the same, they just do it on a much larger scale. This doesn't mean they have the same interests as the rest of the wealthy though. Conflicting interests exist even within social classes depending on the situation. Regardless, estimating the number of billionaires or each of their personal wealth is extremely difficult to do accurately. Since all their wealth is private, the public has no access to the relevant information and have to just estimate based on their stock holdings in public companies. Many people still underestimate just how small a proportion of people billionaires are, about 0.00002% of the global population, or 3,000 people. This is an incredibly tiny minority. Some try to use their wealth to become famous, and you probably already know of those. These people have PR teams helping them boost their public image for their vanity. But you haven't heard of most billionaires. So remember that while we're about to discuss some celebrity examples, this is because it's more convenient to gather information about those particular individuals. In reality, most billionaires are not so open. One person is of special note. The current richest man in the world, and maybe the most notable and obnoxious face of billionaires right now, Elon Musk. Let's make something plainly clear. This man, like practically all billionaires, wasn't self-made, whatever that means to begin with. His father owned the rights to the output of at least 3 emerald mines in apartheid South Africa. His father likewise lent him over 50,000 in inflation-adjusted dollars so that he could buy himself into successful projects. This is beating a dead horse at this point, but there are so many more quirks like this within Musk's life, and it's safe to say that no one watching this has parents that can easily lend them tens of thousands of dollars along with colonial mineral mine wealth.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Anyways, his political career shot off suddenly in 2022 when sex crime allegations against him went public. He allegedly made a SpaceX flight attendant give him a massage, rubbed her leg, exposed his penis to her, and offered her a horse in exchange for sexual acts. What a strange man this is. This fits with a wider pattern of behavior. He was known to have sex with subordinates at his companies, asked women there to have his babies, and was sued by a different group of plaintiffs for the culture of extreme sexism and sexual harassment that developed at SpaceX. His Twitter at the time revealed he somehow knew these allegations were coming. Despite this evidence, though, he never faced court or any investigations. Laws simply don't apply at this level of wealth, as long as you don't leverage your wealth to threaten capital. Regardless, his company paid $250,000 to his accuser in exchange for her silence, a tax-deductible expense, mind you. A life-changing amount for her, but pretty cheap to buy legal immunity, wouldn't you say? But when these allegations later went public, and with his reputation at risk, it forced him to quickly pivot into the anti-woke, left-gone-too-far conspiratorial nonsense he's now been most known for. He kinda already had this type of fan.
Just like nobody's buying Teslas, like that fucking people are pissed off. Like I said, Musk did that voluntarily for no reason. He could have just as easily given Trump the money and said, do this. But no, he fucking personally, put his image on the line. Not even, I guess, not understanding that, he was a huge part of, Tesla's brand. You know, that was, a huge reason why they stayed profitable, because people, for some reason, respected him. Then he just does this, just goes on this austerity spree, destroying the fucking government in front of everybody. And, fucking Tesla lost, billions and billions of dollars, right? No, I didn't listen to the earnings call, but I'm sure it was great. All the fucking board is all, Elon Simps, though, right? So I don't think... he'll probably stay in power. Funding secured.
Based because he was already a billionaire and obvious fraud, but he had previously kept close ties to the Democratic Party, which is equally cringe. and was known more for his massive promises in tech than his right-wing conspiracies. He donated to both parties and even supported Obama. It's easy to see his strategy in aligning himself with Trump now, though. It provides a fan base who don't care about sex crimes. It provides an easy escape to just say the left made up the allegations. It makes sure no matter how obvious a fraud he is,
no matter what,
his projects
just
fail,
says, like, the
he can
deep
still
state
get
made
public
it up.
money from Republican states. He's also under investigation by multiple federal authorities, which he can now defund whenever he wants.
Yeah.
Moving aside from one particular case example, how does one exactly become a billionaire? Well, there's only one way to become that rich, and it's through capital accumulation. That's the core mechanism of capitalism. If you have money, you can buy productive and well-performing assets, factories, land, companies, whatever, and those assets bring in even more income. The average person working for wages can't compete with that. They can't even break into the system. Over time, wealth concentrates, not by accident, but by design. Owners don't create value, they extract it. Workers do the labor, but the owners take the profits. The more you own, the more people you can exploit, and when you're sitting at the top of a global system like this, with billions of people beneath you, even a small cut from each person adds up fast. This isn't rhetoric, this is an empirically verifiable phenomenon referred to as surplus value extraction. For a deeper dive into how this mechanism actually takes place, check out this video here. This is how you get fortunes so massive, they're completely detached from anything a single person could ever do by just working. It's not about working hard, it's about already being rich enough to keep multiplying that wealth. Likewise, nobody becomes a billionaire by selling one specific product. That's just branding. They don't make their money from apps or oil. They make their money from capital, owning things that other people work on. Businesses don't create wealth, people do, and labor does. The thing all billionaires have in common is that their money comes from other people's work. Most often, it's employees who weren't paid the full value of what they created, or less frequently, customers they ripped off. So when you hear somebody described as a tech billionaire or a finance billionaire, just remember, those are surface level differences. In practice, every billionaire is a stock market billionaire. They underpay workers, overcharge consumers, and rely on state support to protect and grow their profits. It doesn't matter the sector, it's the same playbook system. That said, it's still worth looking into how they pull it off. What are the common tactics used to win in capitalist competition and ensure the highest amount of exploitation possible? How do they boost company profits and make sure as much of that profit as possible ends up in their own pockets? Let's walk through some of the tricks. Billionaires usually own companies which have monopolies over certain parts of the market. This allows them to generate massive profits without ever facing the competition capitalism promises. Monopolies empower companies to exploit both consumers and workers the most, and therefore brings the most profit to their owners. Monopolies are another basic feature of capitalist economics. Capitalism always tends towards monopoly. See my video on this here. Bigger companies always have the edge. They scale faster, they produce cheaper, and they've got the cash to bury competition in lawsuits or buy them out entirely. They also push legal boundaries to maximize profit. They can afford the fines, the legal teams, and lobbyists required where small businesses can't. The larger you are, the easier it is to grow. I don't think this is a difficult concept to grasp. The more you grow, the more you can dominate and eliminate competitors in the market. That's why capitalism naturally tends towards monopoly. The system rewards size and punishes small players. Not every billionaire runs a monopoly though, but many do, or they benefit from one close enough in practice. There are many very prominent examples. Obviously that's why there are so many energy and mining and infrastructure billionaires. These fields are most common for legal monopolies, but even in tech, an industry that styles itself as new and competitive and disruptive. Amazon's marketplace, for example, is a monopoly, and they're currently being sued for it. Their whole strategy revolves around predatory pricing. This means undercutting competitors until they can't survive, then hiking prices once the competition is gone. And it doesn't stop there. They've used all kinds of anti-competitive tactics. Price gouging, controlling pricing rules for third-party sellers, removing competing products, rigging search results, and pressuring vendors to let Amazon offer the lowest price. They even had a US patent up until 2017 on one-click purchasing online. This effectively blocked out all competition because they were legally forced to be inconvenient to use. It wasn't even an invention, just a basic use of internet technology. Microsoft did it too. For years, they had a near-total monopoly on operating systems. When they saw software that could run across multiple operating systems as a potential threat, they attacked. After trying and failing to set up a non-compete agreement, they went all in on illegal tactics. They bundled Internet Explorer with Windows, made it hard to uninstall, and made other browsers deliberately harder to use. The goal was to kill competition before it became a threat. This tactic of software bundling is now standard across the industry. Facebook, or now Meta, followed the same path. They had a social media monopoly and started losing ground because their platform sucked. Instead of competing and improving, they just bought out every rising platform. WhatsApp and Instagram and a million others. This isn't innovation, it's consolidation of markets. Musk and Trump are privileged outliers, having built their brands on fraud and idiocy. Most of Musk's successes happened without him present, and Trump's just consistently failed, seemingly. But even Musk found a way to corner the satellite internet market once he was already a billionaire. In some parts of the world, he effectively controls the internet just by spending more money on it than anybody else could.
Because he owns SpaceX.
Billionaires don't get rich on their
Everybody
own.
else had to pay for
Most
launches.
of them are plugged straight into the state, getting public money one way or another. For the monarchs and dictators, it's obvious, it's their whole thing. But even these so-called self-made business billionaires, well, it's the same story, just dressed up in different branding. They rake in huge amounts of public cash, usually through their companies. We're talking subsidies and tax breaks and fat government contracts, even straight up handouts, like the many bailouts they get when market-caused economic recessions hit. Almost every big company with a billionaire at the top has gotten some kind of massive state support at one point or another. And not just once, usually. This happens over and over again, usually under better terms than what small businesses or startups could get. It's part of what keeps them at the top. Musk is the poster child for this. The government's handed him at least $38 billion so far, and that's just the public info. That doesn't even include secret Pentagon deals like the $1.8 billion spy satellite contract for SpaceX.
Yeah,
Then
but
there's Amazon, which has pulled
again,
in
I
over
always have to
$3.7
reference
billion
this.
in local and state subsidies, while towns
They cost half as much as their competitors in terms of like SpaceX, right? Like as bad as they are, everybody else is like so much worse. So if they didn't have those SpaceX contracts, they would be spending like several times as much, right? Like Boeing and Raytheon, and Lockheed, like that's the competitors. It's like the only people, like the only companies worse than fucking Musk's companies are like those, those handful of like the massive like military industrial complex behemoths that, they certainly seem to be dictating our our foreign policy is geared around like their balance sheet, which seems to be pretty powerful maneuver, right? If you can do that, you basically run the world,
towns around the country are cutting public services or raising taxes just to stay afloat. Even Facebook is cashing in, getting massive tax breaks for vague promises about jobs or innovations, and leaving communities with nothing but surveillance and debt. That's also not mentioning all the taxes they
Also,
don't.
fucking Boeing can't do it. Their shit keeps fucking failing, right? They got paid so much more than SpaceX to develop those capsules. And they've had so much longer to do it in, and they still can't get their shit to work, right?
Knowledge.
Pathetic.
The trick is often the same. These giant companies play cities and states off of each other. They promise them jobs, maybe a shiny new facility, and suddenly everybody's throwing public money at them just to stay in the running. Sometimes it's desperation, other
They
times
just
it's just a
gave them more
convenient
ways to
excuse,
sneak
an easy
money
way
in the
for
back
local
door.
officials to funnel cash to the rich in exchange for campaign money or cushy favors. Either way, it's not innovation that builds these fortunes, it's public money, your money, quietly funneled upwards, turned into private wealth for the people already holding most of the cards. Under capitalism, private media tends to conglomerate, and it serves the interests of the
I was
owner
saying that
class
guy
who can
earlier.
always control it and outproduce those smaller groups they don't control. See my video on this here. This is bad enough, but with billionaires able to own majority stakes in media companies, they gain an immense level of personal control over media output. This may be media billionaires who own and control large portions of the media environment, or even unrelated billionaires who purchase media outlets just to further their influence. The Wall Street Journal and New York Times are owned by billionaires. On the TV side, you've got names like Brian Roberts at Comcast and John Malone at Liberty Media calling the shots. Not to mention these are often the same individuals with close ties to state power, or even occupying government positions themselves. This completely undermines the idea of the media holding democratic governments to account if you ever believed this bullshit to begin with. So we have a media system broadly skewed towards protecting vested financial interests. As the rich get richer, they'll inevitably purchase and merge more and more outlets, increasing the amount of the market that they can directly control. Musk and Zuckerberg control social media, with the US threatening to ban the only thing they don't, which was TikTok. There's that thing of the state supporting monopolies again. Even Bezos owns a newspaper, The Washington Post. He didn't build its ill-gotten reputation, he bought it and now exploits it. freedom of the press under capitalism is the freedom for the rich to buy the press, buy the writers, and shape public opinion into whatever serves their class.
When they talk about authoritarian
in the US,
regimes,
every
that's
major
usually what
media
they
outlet
mean.
is owned, at least in part, by a billionaire.
Like
some, like
countries that won't let them buy the media, right? That's like the thing they always complain about with Venezuela, is that they like have limits on, like, you know, capitalist media.
Robert Murdoch and Michael Bloomberg built their empires in media from the start. Others, like Bezos, just bought their way into it once the money was already made. For them, media isn't about journalism, it's about control and pushing their agenda. It's not even subtle. Musk, for example, took over Twitter, gutted the safety systems, and then personally banned journalists who criticized them. That's not just editorial bias, that's straight up, if I don't like it, it goes. He doesn't even pretend to be objective. That's the kind of power you get when you own the platform.
Concerning.
It's not just what gets reported, it's about what doesn't. Stories disappear, certain opinions are sidelined. Journalists know that one person determines the perspective of their whole company, and that to keep a job they must make things their boss's boss agrees with, even if they don't own the publication. A billionaire can fund a lawsuit quietly and take down an entire news outlet if it steps out of line. Just like they buy competing companies, they buy up the press to consolidate their power.
You, sir, have spoken
Whether
the truth.
it's through ownership, influence, or outright censorship, it's all amounts to the same thing. Deciding what the public gets to see, and more importantly, what they don't. Billionaires also try to influence the government directly. Government policy in capitalist democracies always favors the interests of the rich. In places with high concentrations of billionaires, that's especially true, except for China and Vietnam. I wonder why. Regardless, in places like the US, they donate massive amounts to political campaigns. It's also very common for billionaires to donate to both, a clear sign that they're trying to secure their interests on both sides of the balance.
Look, AMC, or MSNBC, speaking of, had this video today.
As the White House Correspondents Association is about to host its annual dinner, a celebration of the First Amendment, the war on the First Amendment in this country wages on. One of the recent battles in this war was the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil. Khalil, of course, is the Columbia University student and protest leader, a legal resident and green card holder of Palestinian descent who was essentially kidnapped on March 8th by government agents, right in front of his 8-month pregnant wife. Now, this week, new court documents revealed that Khalil was detained without an arrest warrant. Khalil now sits in a prison in Louisiana while his American-born wife gave birth to their first child on Monday. In court documents, DHS lawyers claimed that they had exigent circumstances to conduct the warrantless arrest, and that Khalil said he would not cooperate and intended to leave the scene. Of course, we've all seen the footage that was shot by Khalil's wife showing that he was in fact cooperating and told officers, yes, I am coming with you. A group of congressional Democrats traveled to Louisiana this week to meet with Khalil, as well as with Rumaisa Ozturk, the Tufts University PhD student, who was also abducted in Massachusetts. And without explanation and without criminal charges, simply for an op-ed that she wrote about Israel. Here's what they had to say outside the ICE detention facility.
Both of these individuals are political prisoners. They don't belong here. This is not about enforcing the law. This is moving us toward an authoritarian state.
Mahmoud Khalil has lived in Syria under Assad. He knows what an authoritarian regime looks like. And he says, this is it. This is it.
Another detained student who got a visit from a member of Congress this week is Mohsen Mahdawi. Like Khalil, Mahdawi is a Columbia student of Palestinian descent and a peace activist known for building bridges with Jewish students and students of all backgrounds. On April 14th, at his naturalization hearing to become a U.S. citizen, he was abducted by government agents without any charges. Vermont Senator Peter Welch visited him at an ICE prison in Vermont and asked him to respond to Secretary of State Marco Rubio's charge that he is somehow a threat to national security and that his activism is anti-Semitic. Here's what he said.
Basically, he is describing being anti-war as anti-Semitic. How could that be possible when my partners, most of my partners at Columbia's campus and beyond, are Jews and Israelis? My work has been centered on peacemaking. And all what I am doing, I am being a human. My empathy, as I mentioned before, extends beyond the Palestinian people. And my empathy extends to the Jews and to the Israelis.
The abduction of the students and the attempt to deport them is a threat to freedom of speech and an attack on all Americans' right to dissent. And it is being done on the false premise that their speech is both a threat to American foreign policy, which we have said many times on this show is a laughable claim, and that their protests are anti-Semitic and a threat to the safety of Jewish students. But that's a dangerous and, quite honestly, a dishonest smear. We have heard the words of Mahdawi and Khalil. Their allies and partners in their protest movements are, in fact, Jewish students, many of them advocating for peace. But imagine, just imagine for a moment, if one of these students had said, I have killed a lot of Israelis in my life, and there's no problem with that. I mean, that would certainly sound threatening and be a reason for alarm, right? Well, guess what? Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett once said, I have killed lots of Arabs in my life, and there is no problem with that. Well, this year, Bennett has already been welcomed to Columbia University, Harvard University, and Princeton University. And at Harvard, he even went further. He even joked about giving protesters a pager, a violent reference to Israel's deadly pager attack in Lebanon last year. Or imagine for a moment that any of these students, these student protesters, had openly advocated for bombing Israeli food supplies in an attempt to collectively punish and starve the Israeli people. That would be problematic, wouldn't it? Well, guess what? Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's racist national security minister, proudly posted on X this week that food and aid depots in Gaza should be bombed. Again, this man has been convicted in Israel of inciting racism and supporting terrorism. In the U.S., he is welcomed with open arms. This week, not only did he meet with Republican leaders at Mar-a-Lago, but he also spoke at Yale University before coming here to New York City. What happened to all the advocates for campus safety? Where are the congressional hearings? Where are the demands for university presidents to step down for creating a dangerous environment for students? None of that is happening. Because the truth is, this was never about safety on campus for any students. This is a campaign that is all about stifling and now criminalizing criticism of Israel or support for Palestinian rights. And that campaign has become one of the gravest threats to American free speech in our lifetime. Starting us off this Saturday evening is California Congresswoman Laura Friedman. Congresswoman, thank you so much for making time for us. Let me start with the plight of these students. Some of the colleagues, some of your colleagues in Congress are now meeting with these students at ICE detention centers. When the Rumeysa Ozturk video emerged, you posted, this scene and stories like it are deeply disturbing, especially as a Jewish woman. Can you talk about that moment that we're in where Donald Trump is claiming to be fighting anti-Semitism under the guise of protecting Jews, but using that as his cover to advance his authoritarian agenda?
I mean, they just say it's like, oh, the Democrats are defending gang members and thugs or whatever. That's their framing of everything.
I consider what Trump is doing to be weaponizing anti-Semitism, not fighting it. Certainly, we have seen problems with anti-Semitism on college campuses, and we've seen problems with Islamophobia on college campuses. I've worked extensively when I was in the California legislature with our university system and through legislation to find ways for universities to deal with hatred on their campuses, including anti-Semitism. And they were very receptive to that. But what's happening now is not helpful. I don't think it's making Jewish students safer. I think it has a real chilling effect on our students. These students seem to be targeted in a really willy-nilly fashion. This is a chaotic response, and it's one that is frightening because, as you pointed out, it tramples our civil rights in this country, and it chills speech that shouldn't be, that might be difficult for people to hear or offensive, but somebody writing an op-ed in a newspaper that's not calling for violence, that's simply stating an opinion, should not be grounds to be picked up on the street and deported without due process. And let's be really clear that everyone deserves due process. And what we're seeing is that some of the accusations that have been made against these students are just flat out false. And so we need to know if they are really a danger to California, if they're a danger to the United States. Let's see the evidence through a trial. But that's not what this administration's offering. And they've even, it's even turned out that they've deported in some cases the wrong people with some deportations they've done of immigrants. And in this case, they thought they were picking someone up who they thought only had a student visa, who turned out to be a legal permanent resident of the United States. They are chaotic, they are bumbling, and they are trampling on our civil rights.
Can you imagine letting your kid go to school in this country?
If I can pick up on the point that you talked about, the weaponization of anti-Semitism, and ask you about, does this not make Jews actually in danger in this country? Does it not threatening the way that Trump, the administration right now is doing all of this, actually cause a backlash against Jews by using Jews, if you will, as his pretext for this crackdown on freedom of speech? Isn't he opening the door for people to say, blame the Jews if they don't like these arrests and these deportations? The very same way that he, during the campaign, would say, if I lose, basically blame the Jews, or if Jews don't vote for him, they hate Israel.
That is absolutely a concern of mine. And from this White House, you've seen them bring people who are white nationalists, who are from the far right, who are certainly no friends of the Jewish people, into the White House. We've seen them defend the same kinds of people. I worry about the deportations, certainly, and the backlash, as you said, and I certainly don't want universities defunded. Universities having less money for research, less money for scholarships, less money to spend on things like anti-Semitism efforts in the name of the Jewish people. That's not our values, and this administration does not reflect my value as a Jewish woman.
Do you think, obviously that these arrests are happening right now, there's no doubt about it. This escalation, this sharp escalation has happened under the Trump administration with these authoritarian actions. But do you, when you look back at what happened during the protests last year, and they often happened in Democratic-run states or Democratic-run cities, do you think it was a mistake for Democrats, including the Biden administration, to not address these in a different way, to instead fan the flames of the attacks on college students and make these wild accusations against them that Trump is now using to justify his actions?
Great take, dude. Look at this guy.
I think that the campuses were unprepared for some of these protests. I think that there were people who came in, quite honestly, who were chaos agents, weren't even students, and there were strong feelings on a lot of sides, which is understandable given what we've seen in the Middle East. But I think the college campuses have learned from this experience. I've worked with them on making sure that students know what's expected of them, of having, for instance, a code of conduct when students enter universities so that they know what's
most well-behaved protesters in history
and what's crossing a line. And then they're free to cross that line if they want, but at least they would know what the repercussions might be. Prior to the last few years, universities didn't generally have those kinds of understandings with their students. And certainly, I feel that a lot of universities, even ones that had DEI departments, didn't necessarily teach anti-Semitism and didn't have places where students who were experiencing anti-Semitism to go to. So there were issues that we saw on the campus that were real issues, but deporting students is not the answer. The answer is working with college communities to make sure that people understand what anti-Semitism is and what it's not, and what behavior we expect from students when they protest on any issue.
Let me, if I can, widen out a little bit, Congresswoman. You just returned to the U.S. from a congressional delegation trip to the UK, Israel, Jordan, Greenland, focusing on a lot of the very pressing foreign affairs issues facing this country. Today, of course, at the Vatican, President Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And afterward, Trump, questioned Vladimir Putin's commitment to ending this war. It obviously comes in the same week that he sent out a bizarre tweet on Truth Social saying, Vladimir, stop, seemingly begging the Russian leader to end this war. What do you make of these latest developments on that front, and whether or not we are any closer to ending this war with the Trump peace plan?
Yeah, right.
We met with officials. This was a congressional delegation organized by Leader Jeffries, and we met with officials in London and in Denmark. And I can't tell you how alarmed these leaders in Europe are over the U.S. seeming to give a pass to Russian aggression, to try to change the facts that Russia invaded a sovereign nation and is trying to take over part of another country, and is doing so in an incredibly violent manner that they don't seem to show any sign of slowing down on.
Democrats are so bad. Oh my God. I don't think he's gonna do it though. I think he thought he could get a better deal out of Putin, and Putin's like, I'm not fucking doing a deal with you, you psycho, right? And he can't do a deal, like he can't, like the military-industrial complex wants that, right? So he gonna have a hard time pulling out without a replacement, you know, which is what Biden, it's what got us there in the first place, you know? Pulling out of Afghanistan, the MIC needed a new war. I'm telling you, they run our foreign policy. Make no mistake about it. Like, it's fucking Raytheon salesman. It's never been more overt than under Blinken, right? Blinken's job was literal, like he was the revolving door. Like his firm got people jobs, took government workers and got them jobs at, you know, private MIC weapons manufacturers and vice versa. Like he was the spine upon which the revolving door revolves, you know, and all these people in his administration were also, you know, previous clients of his company or currently, you know, working with his company. I'm thinking Mexico, maybe? Or Canada. It's probably not far behind, you know, like TBH. I'm getting Claudia's. You know, I'm get Claudia. Human rights respecter. Plus there's no one checking on the way down there. You know, it's just like a turnstile when you go to Mexico. You just run over. I'll be one of those digital nomads that lives in Mexico City. What's gross to me is the way she was pretending that like Russia is somehow like being brutal or whatever. It's like one of the most restrained I can ever remember seeing a country. Like they're, you know, that's like, yeah, they you know, like have stepped it up a little bit, but like that's why like everybody was like, the Western press was like making fun of them, like look how shitty their military is, they can't even conquer Ukraine. And it's like, no man, they're not trying to shock and awe their next door neighbors, right? Like they're trying to do this with like minimal fucking bad blood in the future. And that's why it's fucking taking forever, you know. But I mean, I respect it, right? Plus again, we have to reference this again, all the sanctions that we did on Russia just strengthened their economy. They made their economy less neoliberal and more like bottom up stable, right? And empowered workers. It was probably a net benefit for them, all told. Like, I can't wait till people start sanctioning us, right? They didn't have any choice, man. Because if they hadn't attacked too, the West was about to, like, they were going to blame Russia for attacking anyway, because they were about to do a false flag, and they would have used that to say that, like, oh, Russia did it. You know? They were about to provoke a larger conflict in Donbass. Like, if you read this shit, this guy was a UN weapons inspector in the Donbass in the months leading up to the war. He's fucking got the, you know, he got the point-by-point details. I think they were definitely getting ready to do something. Yeah, the trade deals with Europe and Russia are mutually exclusive. So Russia offered them a better deal, and they tried to take it, and that's when the shit went down. Right? They just wanted Ukraine to like fucking feedstock for like, you know, brain drain, right? They just wanted that good Soviet education system to give him some free fucking productive labor. They weren't going to do anything for Ukraine. Their only investment would have been like extractive in nature, just like Trump showing you now with the fucking rare earth metals or whatever. Yeah, we talked like exactly. They weren't even answering the fucking phone. Like Lavrov and what's his name? Whatever. The whole fucking, you know, all the cabinet members of the Russian government were like, Blinken wouldn't even answer the fucking phone. Just ridiculous. Which, by the way, all throughout the Cold War, they spoke to each other. They had diplomacy, right? Like this new Biden posture is like ahistorical. I mean, if the West were adults, they probably would have, you know, respected the referendums from 2014, you know, and the immediate aftermath, right? Like, that was the only just thing to do. And not only did they not recognize the referendums, they, like, explicitly invaded to try to contradict them, right? I see no problem with any of the referendums they've had, right? It's completely, seems pretty open to me. And I'll bet anybody, I will bet money that the, like, you know, those new Russian territories, those new oblasts are going to be making higher wages if they're not already. Like, all the stuff Zelensky did, he, like, took the war opportunity to, like, fucking destroy their, any kind of worker protections. Their economy is so fucking neoliberalized now, like, they're in trouble. Fucking turbocharged it.
There's 3 lights now. My God. Oh, wow.
Yeah, a third of the aid money that America and Europe sent hasn't reached.
Oh my God.
Hasn't even reached Zelensky.
Come here. Oh, 4. Come here. Here's another one. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh.
There's definitely not a plane or a planet or whatever.
Hello, July 27, 2010. A new crop circle is discovered.
2010.
And I'm here about 12 hours after it was discovered.
Oh, I bet you it's
about 8
fucking
p.m.
buzzing,
right
huh?
now. It was announced this morning. It's really intricately laid, very beautiful work. It's really big.
Let me see those kernels. Let me see them. Let me see them.
But
Oh yeah, wow, no, yeah, that's anomalous. Look at that.
things like this.
When they're all twisted like that, that's the NHR.
That
Look at that. Yeah, see that? Wow.
and
Look at that.
there's something like this.
You can see there's like, you can tell where it was like
It's
hit with
big.
like a microwave beam or
There's
something.
Crops going
Right, they get
this
those
way.
little nodules.
Crops going this way. Crops going
It doesn't,
this
they don't
way.
break it. When a human does it, the stalks break, right? When they fucking, you know, when they zap it from above, it just bends. Or, you know, twists up like that.
Interestingly, these circles that goes all the way like this has this opening here that has a line that goes underneath the whole lay. It goes. See, it's
Yeah, they were showing civilian areas in the
See?
city.
Under the top
Right.
layer, there's another layer that is going straight through. Straight through. Circle here. Another circle, another circle. It goes straight through. Underneath all this mess, I mean the stuff that is on top, there's a layer that's going straight through the center of each of the ring. Underneath, keep going. This. It's wrapped up. Fancy meeting you here. Look at this one. In the middle part.
I don't know how a farmer does that with a board.
Tied up. Donk. Right in the middle.
Hey, what's up guys? Tyler here with Secure Team. The video that you just saw is one of my personal favorites as it pertains to real, solid evidence of crop circle creation and creation by something other than man. Now, this was recorded in 2010 on Windmill Hill, which is situated in Bristol, England. And I really do have to say, this is one of the most solid crop circle cases that I've ever come across. And that is because it's two-pronged. First, we have a continuance of footage of these what are called light orbs that were seen hovering above the hill as these crop circles were being formed. And so that's what you're seeing in the first part of the footage, which lasts for over 7 minutes. Now, I didn't show you the entire 7 minutes, and I'll post the link to the full video down below, but I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the phenomena that are seen during and before a lot of these crop circles are made. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the TV shows and the debunkers who have come out of the woodwork throughout the years trying to debunk crop circles by stating that they are all simply men who have snuck into these fields at night using wooden planks or rollers to crush these wheat stalks or what have you down into the ground and create these intricate designs, and that it's basically all one big hoax. And I have to say, and I've said this before, and I think this is where people get tricked up, is that just because you have a phenomenon or something happen that can then be similarly duplicated by man does not make it so. In other words,
That's all the
just
debunkers
because
do, is they
a couple
come
of
up with
guys out there
scenarios where
discovered a
it
way
could be
to
man-made.
recreate crop circles by sneaking in with some ropes and some wooden planks does not mean that the crop circle phenomena is not very real and has been shown time and time again
that's more proof
to be
in
part
favor
of something
the
much
fact that the
bigger
government goes out of
and
the way
much
to try
more
to
mysterious
debunk it
than that of a couple of pranksters sneaking into a field. And so that is why I love this footage and footage like it, which shows these mysterious orbs hovering over the field the night before, and then we have video shot during the daytime when they are investigating these intricate crop circles that were created. And you can see in the video the way that the stalks are almost woven together in this very intricate manner. And you will see this with many of the legitimate crop circles out there, where they will not simply be crushed stalks like you would see with most wooden planks. When real crop circles are found, you will find that there is a distinct set of characteristics that completely distinguish them from those that would be man-made and created with a wooden plank. And so what are some of those characteristics, you might ask, and what is the proof that many of these crop circles are not hoaxed and are in fact genuine? Well, many of these crop circles have been scientifically analyzed, where many of the wheat stems have not been crushed, as is what happens with a wooden board or roller, but have been bent at an angle.
I don't think the nukes work anyway. I think the NHI took them out years ago.
We've also found dead and stuck insects on the stems, indicating some sort of energy field that distributed heat over the crops as the circles were being made. There has also been detected levels of radiation over the crop circles, where none of this radiation is to be found outside of said circle. The absence of passage tracks on the ground when the crop circles are man-made. The bending methods of the actual stalks, like you're seeing in this footage here, are always much more complex than what you would see with the hoaxed crop circles. And lastly, many of these crop circles have been seen being created in a span of minutes by eyewitnesses who were there. Now, let's just speak about that for a minute. For instance, there was a crop circle that appeared during daylight hours in less than 30 minutes in July of 1996. It was also noted that this crop circle appeared directly next to the mysterious formation of rocks and stones known as Stonehenge, where we have significant testimony of two airline pilots who on that day in 1996 passed 2 times above the Stonehenge site. The first time, they didn't notice anything unusual in the fields next to the site. The second time, just 30 minutes later that they passed over, they witnessed the sudden appearance of this magnificent crop circle that was now there very close to the megalithic site. Formed, mind you, without the authors being seen by anyone amongst all of the visitors present on the site, and of course, the constant flow of traffic going back and forth next to the field. Now, we were talking earlier about scientific analysis, and in many of these legitimate circles, they have found that the affected crop stocks have had their very genetics changed or altered. They have also found the water content reduced in the affected stocks. Other analysis conducted by researchers have shown some of the physical and chemical modifications of the soils inside the formations. They've found strange deposits of white powder in the center of some of these formations. They've also found an unusual concentration of meteoritic dust or iron oxides, which are particles that actually exist in the atmosphere but at very low concentrations. So inside some of these crop circles, the iron oxide content found was several hundred times higher than that of the crops outside, which shows that these particles were attracted and concentrated by the application of a very strong magnetic field when the formations were being created. And so in summation, it has been found that while, of course, some of these crop circles throughout the world have likely been created by man-made means, these incidents are dwarfed when compared to the high number of circles that display the scientific properties that we just spoke about, the strange weaving of the crops, the orbs seen glowing and moving above the circles, and the eyewitnesses who have watched them be created
what do they
over a
mean?
span
What do they,
of just a
like,
few
is it-
minutes.
I don't know what they mean.
So
though.
with that, I hope you enjoyed today's video. It's an amazing sighting. Let me know what you guys...
I had that theory that there was like some form of like alien class war. You know, like by all accounts, it seems that like the Greys are like working for somebody else. You know, like most stories you hear is like they're, you know, there's like the classic abduction narrative. It's like they're short Greys and tall Greys, and they work for somebody else, like insectoids, right? And that maybe that was like the Greys were trying to get a message to humans. Yeah, they were like, we're, you know, we're like a colonized people, etc. Like, sorry we abducted you. We didn't have a choice. You know. What do you mean? I'm assuming they have, because there's fucking hundreds of accounts of people saying that they rendered them inoperable. You know, it's not without basis that I assume that. You know?
think. Now the question...
Damn it, all these fucking people. It's like no, it's not Yemen. It's Taiwan. Chinese province, Taiwan. What's on the screen? People burning alive? Yeah. Fucking. Don't allow your labor to be used for this. Boeing recruitment panel in U Chicago. And they fucking snuck this onto the projector. Wow. Those fucking people leaving. Zionism is trending. Yeah, that's the other reason why I think they're inoperable, right? Because of the air-gapped fucking, you know, the floppy disk nature of them. Look at those J-dams though, man. You can sign it like fucking Vosh. Assam vs IDF at Bedanoon. Twin Ras Al Ghul sniper op versus tank crew atop a Merkaba at IDF buffer zone outpost in northeast Gaza. Part of breaking the sword ambushes. IDF admitted the tanker was killed, 3 seriously wounded, including a home tunnel unit officer. Yeah. 22-year-old lieutenant. Oops. Ooh.
What is this? Meanwhile, Ethan's New York Times debut. What? Yeah.
Ethan's
apparently, Ethan is not very happy about this. He is very upset that I got this article written, and he's been posting about it. He's been posting about it since
I just believe the fucking historical record.
Our time.
That's what I believe.
Which I think is a crazy thing to do when you first wake up. Like, I first woke up and I posted about the article.
I'm just saying,
because,
I don't think the tip of the spear is the nuclear silos in North Dakota. I think that, like, those are largely for show, right? It's like, given the problems they've had with NHI interventions and fucking 1970s systems, I have a feeling that that's like, you know, an open secret at the, you know, in fucking amongst the brass, because that is an expensive job, and I don't know how profitable it is, right? I think they that's a lot of work to like actually go in there and like fucking replace them with something that works. That's not Skynet, you know. I don't know what the NHI's intentions are. No one knows that, right? We just know that what they've done. And it's like there's a fucking substantiated historical record of them interfering with nuclear weapons, right? It's very, I think their message is very clear in that regard, you know? Like, you can like speculate about like other reasons for why they're here, but that one I think is very intensely anti-nuclear weapons. That's like the main theme of most visitations. It's like, you guys got to stop with the nuclear weapons. Like, this is like the one thing everybody says, right? Yeah. I think they have. That's why I think they've put so much of a premium on the underwater subs, right? It's like they think that those are like somehow untouchable, which I don't think is true. I think they could also get those. We just don't have any stories about that. Like, yeah. Yeah, Wonder Woman that don't work, you know. Yeah, they have no doubt they could put competent soldiers into the battlefield, you know. It's not a question. I think in this one issue, I think like I do not think that they've reckoned with the interference that has been, again, like I keep saying, well substantiated, right? Like, that's been a recurring theme since the jump, the whole time. We just saw it last year with the the drone swarms at Langley and then Lankenheath, right? I think that's the status quo whenever they take anything like that. When it gets moved, right? And I think that they've been shutting down more of these bases, and I just don't think it's been reported on. I think that's something that Trump did, right? He's also kept it like out of the media for the most part. There was like that 160 Minutes thing. Otherwise, like, they're not talking about it. And I think those are all of the same piece, right?
That I was waiting for. I was waiting for it to come out. It's been a long time. The article took place a long ass time ago. It's odd for him to wake up and also post nonstop. Literally nobody says that except those paid by his publicist. As a recent 2 minutes ago, on a multi-story Insta rant, his fluency between culture and ideology has led many to brand Piker or Joe Rogan to the left.
I mean, and know how to find them. You have nuclear
Literally
weapons
nobody
in your
says
car,
that except those paid by his publicist. I don't
boat.
have a publicist. My haters can't tell me you're not hot, bro.
That was the thing. That was the book, the Lou Elizondo's book, right? That's what it ended with. Project Nemesis or whatever they called it. I forget what it was called. They had some dumb name for it. They were gonna try to lure a UFO out with just like nuclear, like fissile material or something, Yeah. Mm. Mm.
And nail paint. This dude is different. Wow, 10 words you say, and they happen to pick the swastika one. So brave of him to disavow Nepo babies. Oh my God. How can people that are fans of this guy not think, dude, you're 40 years old, you have 3 kids, like it's Sunday. Just, can't you save this for the show or something? Like, why are you doing this? How can people not recognize how
people
obsessed
like
this
frat,
is?
bro?
You mean the dudes that are known for hazing their friends to death and sexually
Who's
assaulting drunk
Mr.
college girls?
Flynn?
Doesn't everyone hate frat bros? He's just
Mr.
like he's like dunking on every aspect of the article. Very strange stuff, man. Like, I hope he gets better. Thanks for reading my review. He posted again. And said, thanks for reading my review. Dude, oh my God.
How did you not know?
You don't think the New York Times is trying to make this seem like it's optics and not about issues? It's what they've been doing since election. Dems don't need to fix their policies. They just need a leftist Joe Rogan. And that's what I think this New York Times article is playing up. I think that they're trying to make sense of why someone like myself why someone like myself has seen a lot of success in an otherwise right-wing dominated landscape. And for them, it can't be the issues at all. So it can't be the issues themselves. It can't be what I'm saying. So it must be like the aesthetic. And to be fair,
as in all things,
the way I look does play.
If they could freeze the status quo, they would be stoked, right? They're making money hand over fist with no regulations anywhere, and they fucking dominate everything. If they could, they would, right? So like, they don't care if like like I said, it's like I say this every night. It's like they want to have like a bunch of countries that they can periodically bomb and like use their missile defense systems against, so they can pay to like restock them, and they don't even care if they get hit back. Like, they want to be bombed once in a while too, right? So they can be like, oh fucking, they bombed us, we gotta rebuild it and fucking put twice as many as was destroyed. All that psychotic nationalist bullshit. Well, I don't know. I was just saying, I don't know what their appetite for a long, like, but then there's Silver Corp. It's like the two things is like, they don't want to be embarrassed by the fucking Yemenis, I think, too much. But they also, I think, probably are deluded enough to think that like they can send some fucking, some mercenary bullshit there that'll even like make any kind of noise, right? And I don't think they're going to get backing from any locals, is the other thing they keep talking about. You're not going to get like, the part of the country that the Saudis are occupying is like not, or those people are occupied, right? They're not like, like aligned with you. Yeah, exactly. It's a Fremen. Yeah. It's a fucking, they want our spice. It's the most precious substance in the universe. They're not going to get it. I'm going to make Yemen great again. It's going to be great.
A role in this, right? The way I look does play a role in this. The packaging certainly is a part of it. Yeah, he placed the laughing, crying emoji over, I guess, my statements about
anybody who posts a laughing, crying
commenters
emoji
for what he sees as overt hate speech, but not for speaking critically when they challenge his views on topics like transgender rights or the war in Gaza. Yeah, he clipped
such an
I
angry
find
emote.
anti-Semitism to be completely unacceptable, Mr. Piker said on a call in April. I find the conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism to be very dangerous. He's being especially unhinged because the last episode did very poorly on views because it was the first step in a while, not clickbaiting you or iDubbbz.
Is
yeah,
totally born
as
out
usually
though,
puts
right?
out the dog whistle on his Instagram stories. Then his rabid fan base starts a harassment campaign.
Like him
Shame
saying
on
like,
you. Oh,
they're going to weaponize
he's-
this. 'Cause,
Report this trash.
obviously it was already happening, but like, you can be pretty good prediction if you say something that's already, obviously going on, that's going to accelerate, right? That's just the world that we live in. Bad things get worse.
Puff piece of the New York Times editorial board. Thanks for posting first today. This is clearly pushed forward by a publicist working for Hassan to get ahead of any negative publicity. Dude,
why is that a MAGA body? What are you talking about?
They're allowing an
me?
email hate brigade on their sub, not linking directly, but I posted a tweet about it. I don't know if these guys understand that like this kind of stuff is very annoying to newspapers in general. You don't come across as like a normal person.
That's why we
and
need
also,
to start.
This is a direct brigade. Can you stop talking about him? Dude, are you stupid? Are you actually that stupid that you don't understand what I'm showing here is not just like me doing drama? Like, what are you talking about? This is a direct brigade. Like, this is also literally by Reddit standards not allowed. Like, this is, you're harassing a journalist and you're trying to get a journalist fired for writing a profile on someone you don't like. This is literally Gamergate. This is what Gamergaters were doing for years and years. It's so insane because like every content creator has a decent amount of stalkers, right? But most content creators don't have a stalker that basically makes content off of them stalking.
Dude, I need to get Dr. J's take.
That I do. I like you aren't downplaying the positive side of their obsession aesthetic and rapping aside. There's a real benefit to you being given publicity. Negativity be damned. Yeah, because I don't want people to get fired for, I mean, it's not going to happen anyway, but I don't want people to have to deal with like annoying calls and shit like that. Like it's so stupid. It's so lame. You know what I mean? It doesn't play the role they think. I really hate how the DNC was even has even independence as far as the majority report talking about messaging when it's a completely vapid party and makes the program very close to his doom. Yeah.
Yemen used
no
to be
wonder
one of the
Ethan was so
richest places on Earth.
shocked.
I didn't know that.
What is this? We are not a Hassan snark. Over 150 posts in the last 7 days filled with such bangers as Hassan is jealous of Ethan. I can't stop imagining Hassan bringing someone back to his place for the first time. Note the Hassan post of the most engagement. Yeah, they use the subreddit like I mean, it's a snark subreddit for sure. This is not the first time that these guys have done this. Anytime any journalist has ever written anything about me, they have to basically go private for like a week. It's so gross, man. It's crazy because like none of these other, I wish that like other content creators that are in this space would at least pay a little bit of attention to this and be like, all right, man, you know, this has gotten out of hand. Every hater when he talks about you and to respond, oh my god,
my
can you
snark
move
would
on?
be fucking sick.
What?
That should be so good.
Yeah. Reddit is where the niche issues get resolved and where decency goes to die afterwards. Other content creators don't have mainstream news
pretty much everything.
Political opinions. No, I know,
You could
but
find me
like,
saying anything.
like
at
this is
point.
very clearly a major issue, right?
Just like
on its own, regardless.
sarcastic
Like
and
this is
otherwise
an extended year-long crash out that has turned into like constant brigading, doxing campaigns, frivolous litigation to get people's private information, to bully them, to harass them, going after Redditors, going after journalists.
Going after Redditors is so embarrassing.
It's so weird. It's so strange that it's just like something that
I don't know
we
how
all have
anybody
to
puts
put
up
up
with this
with.
from the people they
Other
follow.
content creators
It's
themselves
intense,
see this kind of
dude.
thing and go, ugh, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to incur the wrath of Ethan's foot soldiers.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's such a strange, there's just a strange place to exist in where everyone is like, yeah, this stuff is weird and gross.
This is why the left has moral high ground on like everything. It's like, because like he wouldn't do that and he would still get the benefit of it because his asshole fans are going to attack Hassan. Then Hassan's people can like defend him, right? He doesn't need a troll army, right? It's like, you know, you have them fucking, you have justice on your side or whatever, right?
But you know, there a lot of people are just like genuinely worried that he will come after them. This is something that happened with Aiden Ross as well initially.
And it burns them up, and they get so mad about that.
Why are you shocked? They did the same with D for 5 years. I know. They are still first world problems, though. No, I mean, yeah, that's true. But we are in the first world, you know? I'm trying to put the truth out in the space where people may see it in my free time, but the DDG&E community is legion. It's tough to break through. Yeah. Just remember, it's mostly online. Even though the more we spend time online, the more the shit we do online becomes the reality. New York Times article title change. What did they change it to?
Spends all day online.
Nobody liked the article title initially, so I'm not surprised. A progressive. Oh my God! They literally changed it to what I just said. A progressive mind and a body made for the manosphere.
They just changed it to what he
That's
said.
Cool.
Really?
Anyway, I think it was a good. I think it was a good article. Obviously, Jack's the man. By the way, he was dope.
Oh,
He was
Jack
great.
Crosby. Yeah,
and
Ukraine simp.
I hope that he doesn't get a lot of harassment. You know, paid publicist confirmed. Yeah. Do you think that debating Ethan will shut him and the Legion up? No, of course
you should
not.
debate Ethan. That'd be so
No, I think
funny.
the fact that it's online makes it a more pressing of an issue. At this point, most people in the 18 to 25 age group primarily gets their info online. I know, but I'm also online. You know, I'm also duking it out here. It just sucks because like I'm duking it out over here,
Put up your
and
dukes.
I wish that I wouldn't have to deal with like people who consider themselves to be liberals and present themselves as liberals, who are supposed to be like ideologically aligned with someone like myself, especially at a time when there's more pressing issues like
don't trust
the Trump
liberals.
administration,
Don't
you know,
trust the liberals.
throwing the Constitution in a pile and lighting it on fire.
Don't trust
right?
the liberals.
Do you see what I mean? Like, it just sucks that I also have to deal with like the apolitical drama side of things. Like, it's not enough that there is already so much.
You should trust the
so
liberals.
much right-wing commentary all over the internet, like
I'm gonna
everywhere,
trust some liberals, I
everywhere,
feel like.
right?
Just 'cause
But
I'm
then also
contrarian.
on top of that, like even the apolitical guys and the liberals and the
Anybody knows
centrists
any
also
libs,
have to
send them
constantly
my way.
present, you know, my style of politics as like bad. And these guys never actually present a leftist voice that is good, by the way. It's not like they're propping up certain people and being like,
They
this
don't
is
have
actually a
one.
really
They
good
don't
person
have
on
one.
this issue. Like, Ethan tried doing that for Israel Palestine, and the guy he came up with was Boner Box. Like, that
Yeah,
person is
Boner
not
Box, dude.
like there was a point I think when
God.
he was definitely more critical of Israel, but he's not. Like, he went to Israel, like he did a propaganda trip,
dude,
with members
Boner
of
Box.
the Israeli with members of the Israeli foreign ministry. So it's really up. I was told by a prominent former gamer turned liberal commentator that if you woke up tomorrow and there were no hit pieces, you'd be bothered. You mean they lied to me? No, it would be amazing. God, it would be the most amazing moment of my life. There would be like a moment of peace for once, you know? I mean, those guys know that that it's a distraction and it sucks, right? Because if they thought that it was something that I enjoyed, then they wouldn't do it. These people despise me. Like, they hate me. And they've said as much. I mean, some of these guys have gone as far as to say, like, oh, I hope he kills himself, which is so crazy because, like, you know, I'm doing pretty good. Just turn off your PC for peace, little bro. Yeah. Much love from Prussia, bro. I asked Wilhelm to put in a good word for you with the Sultan. Keep it up, brother. Thank you. It's socialism or barbarism. Thank you for the 10 gifted subs.
Come
Is
on.
there anything that
And socialism
to
or
get Ethan to stop?
barbarism
No,
in
he'll
here
never stop.
with the 10
Especially
gifted
because he
subs.
knows that whenever
would be
he
cool.
brings up my name,
Hassan doesn't need it. I
and
do.
attacks me, he brings on some of the grossest losers online to come and watch him. They love that shit. So I think this is beneficial for him as well. He gets to feel smart, which is what he wants more than anything else, and it gives him like clout as well. I mean,
Imagine wanting to be
you know,
smart.
I feel like he's got his own shit to worry about at this point, though. I mean, he's got like a billionaire that he has a defamation suit around.
What billionaire did he defame?
I don't normally condone this kind of stuff. What? No. Shut the up. Don't say like that. Hot take. I think the reason he wants to debate you is so he can close the strong obsession and make it into a less small obsession. Thus, he can pull all his main focus to IDubs. He's like the USA with the Middle East and China. No. Chris Kunstler popped off again.
That's
Loner
funny.
Box, Israel's dumbest propagandist.
No,
Wow.
there's so many dumb fucks over
Anyway.
here.
Did he have targets before you, which became so obsessive about? Yes. I think pretty much everyone. But the only difference is I don't think it was this long and this extended. And also their politics were so bad and the stuff that they had done were so bad that most people didn't realize that it was like obsessive in a similar vein, myself included. Like I don't also know Ethan's background that well. I'm not super familiar with what he had done with like his former podcast co-hosts like Trisha or any number of different people that he's like targeted in the past, whether it be what do you call it? Keemstar or all these other dudes, right? Like, I don't know. So, you know, but he talks about Loner Box still staying. There were, wait, what? Oh, this is the other thing I was going to show you. Before the New York Times article came out, he posted one of my full takes where I say like, if you're a Zionist, like I think people who promote Israel should not be in local office. Like they should be treated in the same exact way that people who promote Nazi Germany or apartheid South Africa are. And and he posted it on his Instagram. He posted it on his Instagram story, my full take. Here I think like this will never happen, but in a totally just world, any kind of, regardless of your background, any kind of Zionist tendency should be treated in the same way as being a rabid neo-Nazi. And you shouldn't even let someone be the local dog catcher as Felix was posting if they've ever exhibited any sort of like positive feelings about the state of Israel. I'm so serious about this. I think like this will never happen, but yeah. So he posted this and said, this is a significant escalation of violent, dehumanizing language, even for him. And I found
violent,
this very strange.
Language.
Does he assume that people are not going to actually watch or listen to the video that he posted? Like, what's the dehumanizing and violent language here? Can you tackle the argument? Or is it all you got is just a cry and be like, wow, he's being mean to Israel again and defenders of Israel again. How violent and how dehumanizing. I said, Lamau, yes, I think a politician supporting Israel, which is an apartheid state doing a genocide, should be treated in the same way as a politician supporting Nazi Germany or apartheid South Africa. Why is this violent language exactly? You could say this about Russia or Iran and you get promoted, but God forbid you say this about Israel. Like how do people figure this out? Just be ready for this to be a big deal, even though he banned this person? No, it's not going to be a big deal. They found a chatter in the photos they took that was insta banned. Like, I don't give a shit. It's only a big deal if you make it a big deal by bringing it over here. Who cares if they try to like brigade it and lose their minds over it? Yes, unlike Ethan, I actually don't only have paid members who I then ban anyway. Okay?
Dude,
Ethan only allows paid dissent, people that pay him to speak in his chat, and he bans them regardless when they actually step out of line in any way, shape, or form. He's created the most insane hug box of all time. I, on the other hand, like having political discourse in this chat, in this community. I'm a political commentator. I have Trump supporters on here. I have neo-Nazis that come into the chat all the time. I have Ethan Klein fans who come in here with no understanding of anything, really.
They're doing Nazi shit all the time.
Ethan is so allergic to any sort of pushback that he will literally button his employees that he has hired when they say something that he finds to be unacceptable. And that, by the way, isn't that they've said something reactionary or whatever. He finds it to be unacceptable because they're dissenting. Okay. And then those guys mysteriously leave the studio in the aftermath of that, you know? But yeah, it's interesting that, you know, he posted this take as it.
Very provocative.
Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon. The UFO sightings, they don't stop. And we've got a helicopter in hot pursuit.
Oh yeah, this one.
Of a
Did you already watch this one?
Watch this.
I feel like I don't really know what to think until I hear what Dr. J thinks.
That is a
That is a straight up orb, dude. Being followed by a freaking helicopter. What the hell? I just now pulled up. Smells like something's burning. That is
I know that
nuts.
smell.
All right, we've got the eyewitness reports. We've got a close-up of the unidentified object. And it's there being in hot pursuit. It's being chased by a helicopter. Obviously, this video is provocative. We've got so much coming in tonight. He said that he could almost smell something burning. Yeah, Blake, this is some kick-ass footage right here. Some of the best that's just come in to third phase. Look at this thing. We see this charged, bright ball of light, and the helicopter's maybe about 40 feet away from this thing in hot
Not a
pursuit.
headlight.
And this is clear evidence of our military or maybe a police presence engaging with something is unknown.
Yeah, is this ET or is it something else? You know, Trump came out and did his announcement about what was happening in New Jersey months ago, and this is still happening now. And what was interesting is what he said about the military and that this was actually happening with the military, but he never mentioned the orbs. He just mentioned the drones.
We got to get the pilot's point of view on this. Obviously, I'm sure that there's video of this close encounter of the unknown. And what is going on in New Jersey? It seems like the sequel is back. People are posting a lot of UFO evidence and these lights in the sky. And obviously, we're looking at something. And he said, again, the person said, do you smell that? So there's some kind of discharge of ozone or something coming off this light. Now we have this photograph that has just come in moments ago.
Oh, dude, that's fake.
Again, not one of these orbs, but this.
No, dude, Carl Crusher said he made that. I saw on Chode, right? Which is kind of a dick move if you think about it. Like people like introducing fucking AI UFO videos into the fucking mix, especially with the wild shit that's been seen lately, stuff that's all fucking misshapen and all. This just makes it so much fucking worse. It says searches for something in the ocean off Hawaii.
Except on the ocean, it seems to pulsate. This thing just stands still. I'm gonna be amazed because look how slow this is.
Dude, is that Brent Cousins?
Do you hear any sound whatsoever? You see the light off the... Oh yeah, it's hitting something. It's searching for something out there. Wow. Look, it's holding. It's just stalled out there. Brent was there filming, and I was there just basically being a spectator for a UFO event. And as you could hear, there was nothing that could indicate that this is any kind of conventional aircraft. We didn't hear anything. It was totally silent. Like, you're absolutely right. And take a look at what's happening here. We got a super close up of whatever we witnessed last night, and you can see it's illuminating the ocean like I've never seen anything do before. That's wild.
That is wild. Look at that thing. Holy shit.
Blake, do you see that?
Dude.
We're seeing flashes, pulses of light as it pulses off whatever this object is. And let me tell you, we didn't see any kind of object whatsoever. No propellers, no fuselage, nothing. Just a luminescent light. And as we can see, the pulses don't match up with the light below. It seems like this energy, this orb is just transmitting its light down on the ocean.
That's crazy. Do you guys have a new one tonight?
This kind of drone that is Nothing like we've ever seen is up there.
Yeah.
But look.
What is that? Whoa.
Right, here we go. The information. South Korea captured within the past 48 hours. We're looking at some kind of discharge of energy coming out of this static of light. It's pulsating. It's very bizarre. It's just, I thought it was a kite there for a second, but I don't know. I'm kind of rolling that out as I'm looking at this a little closer.
Yeah, Blake, we're going to roll out a kite. Definitely not. We're looking at something charged up in the sky, and it's kind of spitting out these extremities of a distortion of light. And then you see the pink and hues and different colors that explode from this energy right there. Interesting stuff. It's distorting the atmosphere. Wild footage out of South Korea. Is this some sort of a new tech or
That's
something
gnarly.
otherworldly coming into our skies, just kind of revealing itself as something new? Because if you've ever seen anything like this, you let us know, because this is the first here right at third phase.
I think this is definitely something that has entered our atmosphere from outer space. And, you know, it definitely seems like a huge charge of energy. Just look at all the color projections of light coming out of it. I mean, this is probably the biggest charge of energy I've ever seen in our atmosphere. I mean, this is absolutely an amazing spectacle.
Yeah, that's pretty gnarly.
Look at this.
Fuck that is.
It has these almost.
You can see the object in the
then they
middle,
dissipate.
right?
1,
Like
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but 7. It just keeps going.
it looks
You
like those
see
wheels
this
within wheels,
source
dude. Just
of
like Bob says.
energy. What is it? What are we looking at? That's something that caught this person's interest as they zoom up in broad daylight. And could you imagine if this was captured at night? The luminosity of the aura of light that surrounds this craft would be immense, but in broad daylight, it's spectacular. The energy.
I mean, I think
behind
they
this
do,
is
but they
it's
do
beyond
like a form
comprehension
of
here.
like
Yeah,
low energy
imagine,
nuclear reaction.
South Korea, it's a big country.
I
There's
think that's
big
what it
cities.
is.
I'm
is
sure
what those
there's
orb
more
things
of
are.
this,
I think it's like a
footage of being captured on
ball
camera
of, like,
right now. We're
fusion.
just getting one of the aspects of it. You see it right there. This is 100% legit. You can see just the natural motion of the
I
camera.
think it
pulling
absorbs
in. There's
shit
no
from our
CGI
Earth
or
and
AI
then turns
going
it
on
into
here.
like
this is a real
you
deal.
know.
Now we just got to ask ourselves the big question: why is this up there in
Like
the
a
sky?
costume,
And what's
sort of.
the reason behind it? Because this makes no sense.
That's why the shapes are always different, right?
You know, I'm almost wondering if this is some sort of particle or space junk that has come down and is just burning up in the atmosphere. I mean, you see this charge of these discharges kind of coming out of the back of it.
You can see how it's like a
you know, maybe it's
fucking orb
just something
thing
that's coming
that's
in
like
hot.
pulsating.
You know, this thing definitely seems very stationary, so maybe it isn't a re-entry.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. This
I mean, it
thing
could be a
remains
plasmoid. It
pretty
could be one of
static
those
in the
living
air, and
plasma
it's incredible.
creatures.
Now we have something coming in from a rock stars. You ever heard of the band Scorpions? Well, the
Oh, no.
bass player for the past 12 years, retired, submitted this UFO video to
Oh,
us.
hell
Watch
yeah.
this.
Wow, guys, this is so f***ing crazy. These things disappeared about 2 hours ago, and just now, a few minutes ago, they came back. Let me show you. Look at this. They're forming like smaller circles, and they're starting to sparkle and stuff.
That's weird.
What the fuck is this?
What are those sprites?
They're right above my house. And there is no light beams or light sources coming from anywhere. As you can see, there is no lights in the sky anywhere. I give you a 360. No sources of light.
What?
And those guys are right there. How the hell did they get up there? What is this?
Base
I
North
have literally
Koreans.
at least 150 DMs. I don't have no explanation for what this is.
Well, that's Ralph Rickerman, bass player for the Scorpions, 12 years.
Hell yeah.
He's put it out on social media, and he's got
Cool.
some questions. Of
You got
what
some
happened
debunkers in
over
his
Los
chat?
Angeles. I guess he's got some reports. Paula, you just contacted him moments ago.
Yeah, he put this on his Instagram story last night, and he's been a good friend of mine for many years. And
oh yeah,
you know, I saw this video, and
good
I
friends with the guy from
felt
Scorpions.
Like it'd be important to bring this up on here today, so I messaged him about it, and he was like, "Yes, please, please put it out. I want to know what this is." This was actually at the top of the Hollywood Hills, you know, nearest place up there, I guess. So. Very interesting. He doesn't know what it is.
Spotlights.
Lots of DMs coming in. People are tripping out about it.
It's probably fucking spotlights.
Yeah, it's crazy. Ralph's got like 500,000 subscribers on his Instagram. It's nuts. People are asking, "What is this?"
Those are probably spotlights. There's probably some premiere on Hollywood Boulevard.
This could be some sort of, again, Hollywood event, splashing something up in the clouds, trying to create some sort of spectacle.
Coming from Scientology HQ.
Hey, thanks, Ralph, for
their
submitting
fucking,
this. We love the Scorpions.
Their orbs popping off.
Now, check this out. Remember this movie? Obviously, Terminator 2. Well, look at this.
It'd be funny if it was the Scientologist all along. Liquid metal.
Science fiction has become science fact. Look at the technology. Particle armored liquid robot consuming an object, basically showcasing something that is quite frightening but exciting at the same time. Look at this thing. As it absorbs its opponent. Should we be worried, Brent? Well, Blake, this is perfect for you to bring in Terminator 2, one of our favorite movies. And James Cameron was ahead of his time. Now look at it. We're living in the future right now, seeing this kind of ball. Looks like a potato split through the bars, absorb each other, and move on its own free will. This is a spooky, but it could be used in many ways. It could be used to rescue and all sorts of applications in science, but for other ways of it. Look at the Terminator 2 right there. He's dropping his cigarette because this is mind-blowing stuff. This could creep into your house. It could be a nightmare, or it could be on the cusp of history of new technology.
You know, just the fact that they say that this thing is robotic makes me wonder, does it have some kind of intelligence to it? Obviously, if it's a robot, they're able to control it in some sort of way. So what are they going to use it for?
Good question. Now, more videos. Florida coast. Watch this. So the video just lasts a few moments in time. We're going to add some filters in there. Guys, I want to get your thoughts. Is this some kind of massive UFO event or a military exercise? I wanted to share it with you because I'm sure a lot of people saw this in recent times right there off the coast of Florida and was wondering what the heck's going on. Is this some kind of military flare, Brett? Well, that's a big question. I'm looking at this thing as it approaches. We're looking at a couple filters, but right there we're seeing this kind of large cloud. You don't see like military planes or helicopters or FAA lights. All you see is this big cloud that drops this enormous energy ball, and you can see it right above the surface of the water as it's reflecting this whole event. This is a really neat capture. I'm not sure if it's military, but I'm sure it got a lot of people's attention over there on the coast of Florida.
Wow.
This is incredible to see just because of the fact that it looks like a moving cloud and then this light drops out of it. And it makes me wonder how often this happens with just, you know, regular strange.
That might be humanity's attempt to impersonate those orbs.
People see it and they think that, you know, maybe it's hiding a mothership. I mean, this is something that's a phenomenon that people talk about very often, but here it is right before your very eyes.
So we got this just recently. Did you?
Did you see that
new video on the internet?
That is so wild, dude.
I don't know. People said, third phase of the moon. What do you think is really going on here? So we wanted to take a closer look. Some people are saying that this girl, riding her bike, just got kind of dragged by some kind of unforeseen force or possibly abducted. Guys, I want to get your thoughts. But Brent, is there some kind of manipulation going on here? You see the
What if it was like
her
a
bike's
crane
being
that
pulled,
hooked her
thrown up in the
tire
air,
or something?
and then just slams on the sidewalk.
Oh my
on
God,
the corner,
dude.
Brett.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been looking at this. It's been making the rounds on the net, and
It looks pretty
this
real,
girl,
doesn't
whatever's
it?
happening is, in my opinion, legit. And I hope she's okay. Maybe it's a guy. I'm not sure, but we're looking at this, and boom, it's wrap around, and you see the bike drop.
You see the bike drop.
Right at
That's
this
the
point,
part
look at
that's
the
gnarly.
bottom left. We're gonna start it right now again, and you're
I
gonna
mean-
see manipulation, Photoshop. In what I've been
There's
hearing
all
in
those
little
stories
investigation,
about
she
what's
was
her name,
caught
the
on
lady
some
in
sort of,
Brooklyn.
like rope or harness, as something went by, and it was something that was pulled.
Yeah,
not
that's
by
what
a
it looks
phantom
like.
or nothing UFO related. It was an accident.
Oh,
And it
what?
was,
You heard about
manipulated,
this?
Like,
You researched this?
Yes. I'm just. I wanted to.
Are you just guessing
run
that?
by Brent. Again, you point out some kind of.
I mean,
distortion
sure, it
right
could
there
be,
next to the
but
bike.
she could also
Obviously,
be
I think
getting
this person
fucking
got
zapped
hooked
up.
on something, and then somebody.
Like
took
in Coloris.
Some kind of agenda and wanted to make it its own. I'm.
You know,
deeming
in
this not legit
Coloris,
of any kind of
they
paranormal activity or abduction.
zap people,
Now, there's a lot of
fucking
videos
yank
that we
'em up.
shared with you tonight, and this one's an incredible one. We wanted to get
Or
your
maybe
thoughts
they just zapped. I don't
in
know.
Tonight's episode.
I know they
we
zapped
played
them.
Third Phase of Moon for a while, and we're going to be here with you all night in tonight's live premiere. We want to get your comments. Now, let's roll this one again. Coming out of.
No, I don't know. The moving figure blurred out. I mean, I'm thinking there's that case of the lady with the cops. The cops came forward and they like didn't know each other, but the cops were like, "Look, I was there. I saw it. I had to come forward." Something like that. What's her name? It was like she was. I think she like did conventions and stuff afterwards. She got like beamed up to a ship in front of everybody. I mean, that's the story you hear, right? Is they get like yanked out of their houses and just they don't remember it. Let me see the plausible. 25 Yeah, that seems pretty sick, dude. I'd buy that. Gear. I bet you this guy shreds.
Right? Using the GL4, using the GL4 Mark II Looper. Let's do something real simple. Just kind of a...
You probably need some more pedals, dog. Never mind. He doesn't shred at all. Oops, fuck. Did we watch this one?
What do the alien orbs and drones have in common with ancient pyramids?
Yeah, we watched this one.
The idea that a robust human skull is a primitive trait is a non-scientific idea. In hunter-gatherer societies, a thick brow ridge may have been seen as a sign of intelligence. We'll circle back to this idea later. Several Denisovan populations repeatedly interbred with modern humans. A new study of Denisovan admixture reveals that 4 highly divergent populations mixed with modern humans. Scientists believe that individuals from the most recently discovered hominin group, the Denisovans, who interbred with modern humans, passed on some of their genes through a series of distinct interbreeding events that shaped early human history. The discovery of a new human group in the Altai Mountains known as Denisovans was one of the most exciting discoveries in human evolution in the last decade. Unlike Neanderthal remains, the Denisovan fossil record only includes a finger bone, jawbone, teeth, and skull fragments. Using the surviving Denisovan segments in modern human genomes, researchers discovered evidence of at least 3 previous introgression events from different Denisovan populations into modern humans. Each of them has varying degrees of relatedness to the sequenced Altai Denisovan, indicating a complex relationship between these sister lineages. Here, we examine the evidence that suggests that several Denisovan populations, which most likely had a wide geographical range, adapted to different environments and interbred with modern humans multiple times. We then discuss how archaic variants have been influenced by demographic history, negative and positive selection, and conclude by suggesting potential new lines of research. Subsequent genome analyses revealed that Denisovans diverged from Neanderthals 400,000 years ago, and that at least 2 distinct Denisovan populations interbred with ancestors of modern Asians. Interestingly, it was once theorized that Neanderthals evolved from a common ancestor with gorillas, while humans evolved from a common ancestor with orangutans.
That's fucking stupid.
It is a common misconception that humans evolved suddenly and neatly from a single common ancestor, but as we learn more, we realize that interbreeding with different human species occurred and helped shape who we are today.
I think we don't really know what happened, man.
Using
There's
the
a lot going
surviving
on back in the
Denisovan
day.
segments in modern human genomes, scientists have discovered evidence of at least 3 previous events in which genes from different Denisovan populations found their way into the genetic signatures of modern humans. Each of these has varying degrees of relatedness to the sequenced Altai Denisovan, implying a complex relationship between these sister lineages. Several Denisovan populations, which likely spanned Siberia to Southeast Asia and Oceania to South America, were adapted to different environments. Given the fact that recent DNA studies show that Papuan Highlanders interbred with a Denisovan-related group, possibly as recently as 15,000 years ago, we should be looking for skulls with so-called archaic-looking features in Papua and Australia. However, this archaic population is deeply divergent from the northern Denisovans population from Siberia and China. Scientists identified another Denisovan population which lived in Southeast Asia that diverged around 363,000 years ago from the Siberian group. The Denisovan lineage found in Australia and New Guinea split off from the northern Denisovans around 283,000 years ago, suggesting they arrived in Australia and New Guinean around 300,000 years. This would have given them ample time to spread throughout the landmass known as Sahul, which is the connected lands of New Guinea, Australian and Tasmania during Ice Age
Look at
sea
that
levels.
Denisovan bracelet.
This also
That shit's
means that
wild,
this
right?
so-called Denisovan lineage is as different from northern Denisovans as Neanderthals are from Homo sapiens. Therefore, the northern Denisovan skulls, such as from China, are not a good indicator of the skull morphology of this population. Until the Denisova genome was found, many paleoanthropologists assumed that South and East Asian populations of the early late Pleistocene were relict populations of Homo soloensis, representing a relatively static population history from the initial human habitation of Asia. The Denisova genome appears inconsistent with that static model, according to a recent study titled How Australia Informs the Worldwide Pattern of Pleistocene Human Evolution. There are no diagnostic skeletal remains of Denisovans to help with this, and only limited inference is possible from the Denisovan range. But if we begin with the assessment that the sum of the ancestry of Australians is from populations inhabiting regions closest to Australia, one of the key conclusions of this research, and are mindful that the Denisovan haplotypes are unlikely to be from East Asians or Southeast Asian populations as they are constituted today, the other potential nearby source of Denisovan haplotypes would be from the Homo soliensis specimens from the Solo River in Java. We have no Homo soloensis DNA, but in view of the anatomical comparisons presented here and the geography of the region, where else could the significant Denisovan contribution have come from? According to the report, WLH-50 is the 29,000-year-old fossil of a large, young to middle-aged male found in dune deposits near Lake Garnpung, one of the Willandra lakes in New South Wales, Australia. Its importance stems from the significant similarities it appears to have with the nearby and most probably earlier human sample from Java, Indonesia. Two implications of these similarities are important: the implications for human ancestry and the implications for the place of Homo soloensis in human evolution. Embedded in the bank of the Solo River in the shadow of the volcanoes of Sangiran, Homo soloensis remains apart. Volcanism deeply affected life, death and fossilization of Homo soloensis in eastern Java, where the volcanic province has produced 100 fossils. However, for a long time Homo soloensis did not find a real place in taxonomy and in the scientific debate, whereas Neanderthal is still famous for its cultural or biological struggle against the ancestors of modern humans. Experts claim that there was no overlap of Homo soloensis with Homo sapiens in Java, and that Homo sapiens arrived much later. But many researchers are not convinced because Homo soloensis fossil material from other Javanese sites has yet to be properly dated, and may be even more recent. The Homo soloensis remains are characterized by more derived traits than more archaic Javan Homo soloensis, most notably a larger brain size, an elevated cranial vault, reduced postorbital constriction, and less developed brow ridges. But the forehead is proportionally low and also has a low angle of inclination. The new study provides both a systematic and comprehensive description of the WLH-50 fossil in a comparative context, and an interpretation of its place in human evolution. A comparative analysis of the WLH-50 cranium is important for understanding its morphological pattern and addressing its ancestry, in particular whether there are multiple ancestors for WLH-50 and other Australians that include late Pleistocene Indonesians from Java. Besides these anatomical considerations, the issues also are framed by genetic analysis, including both paleogenetics and observations of mitochondrial and nuclear DNA from modern populations, and we discuss their implications as well. Investigators concluded that WLH-50b is a normal specimen without evidence of pathology or deformation, and that elements of its anatomy are found throughout the Australian fossil record as it is known today. The comparisons reveal WLH-50 has substantial similarities to the Homo soloensis, but not identity with them, and a demonstrable pattern of multiple ancestors that includes Homo soloensis as part of the network of human evolution in Australasia. WLH-50 is much more robust than any Australian hominid found previously. In fact, it makes the cow swamp remains look gracile by comparison. This new specimen greatly reinforces the regional continuity linking Indonesia and Australia. The morphological sequence found in Australia shows clearly that regional features must be separated from grade features seen worldwide in order to understand the differing patterns of late Pleistocene human evolutionary change. It has been said that WLH-50 has many of the same features as Homo soloensis, but some of WLH-50's most notable characteristics include a thick brow ridge, unusually thick and dense cranial vault, a large cranial capacity of 1590 cubic centimeters, an extended neck area for muscle attachment, occipital bun, and robust size. Could this robustness have been seen as a sign of intelligence rather than as archaic? We can only speculate what the ancients believed.
Big ass brain though, didn't they?
According to the recent African origin theory, the archaic humans from Indonesia are classified as Homo soloensis, a different evolutionary species that could not have contributed to the ancestry of modern Australasians. Therefore, this theory of complete replacement makes clear predictions concerning the ancestry of the specimen WLH-50. The fossil is potentially only 14,000 years old, according to gamma spectroscopy and thermal ionization mass spectrometry uranium series dating. It has been suggested that the latter technique provides a minimum age for this fossil, due to the fact that uranium uptake begins following burial. Meanwhile, ESR dating techniques calculated that the bone fragment was 29,000 plus or minus 5,000 years old. However, even under the most generous interpretations of lineage divergence, different putative ancestors of WLH50 have not been separated for long enough for significant reproductive isolation to be expected. This assessment is also supported by the analysis of nuclear DNA and by observed mixtures of both Neanderthal and Denisovan nuclear DNA with each other and in many human populations. Meanwhile, the pattern of variation outside Africa appears to reflect interbreeding among populations that were much more separate during the period before 100,000 years ago, including the Neanderthals and Denisovans. This historical pattern is not uncommon among mammals, for which reproductive incompatibility has rarely evolved in a period shorter than 1 million years. The recurrence of this pattern within and outside Africa and the geographic specificity of Denisovan and Neanderthal descendants both show that interbreeding among these ancient people recurred within their habitats. Neanderthals and Denisovans were part of the biological species Homo sapiens. Therefore, today's people around the world are a relict mixture of populations from an ancient species much more genetically and morphologically diverse than now. Accepting that Neanderthals and Denisovans are sister groups within the species Homo sapiens, there remains a fundamental difference between them. As far as the fossil record is concerned, we cannot identify who the Denisovans are. While there are almost certainly Denisovan fossils in the hands of paleoanthropologists today, we cannot recognize them, and it is even possible that there never was a recognizable sample of Denisovans in the sense that there is a recognizable sample of European Neanderthals. Surprisingly, the Denisovan contribution to the nuclear DNA of populations from New Guinea and Australia is some 25 times greater than the aforementioned contributions to mainland Asia and the Americas. The highest frequencies of Denisovan nuclear DNA in living populations are found in indigenous Australians and similar or slightly less in New Guineans. More broadly, current populations with significant amounts of Denisovan DNA are only found east of Wallace's Line. However, speculation surrounds the exact age of this fossil and a debate concerning its ancestry in relation to other late Pleistocene humans, as well as Homo soloensis, due to their close resemblance to one another. An ongoing debate within paleoanthropology is whether to place Homo soloensis as Homo sapiens or Denisovans. Evaluating this ancestry is important to our understanding of modern human origins in Australasia, because the prevailing models of human origins make different predictions for the ancestry of this specimen and others like it. The out-of-Africa theory, also known as the replacement theory, predicts that late Pleistocene Africans are direct ancestors of WHL50 and that the Homo soloensis are not direct ancestors of Australians. With the discovery of the so-called Denisovans, many now believe that Homo soloensis could be southern Denisovans. In fact, evidence of a Southeast Asian location for the Denisovan admixture thus suggests that Denisovans were spread across a wider ecological and geographic region, from the deciduous forests of Siberia to the tropics, than any other hominin, with the exception of modern humans. Homo soloensis's last appearance coincides with a time when the world shifted from a glacial period to an interglacial period, and temperatures rose. Java, which is now mostly rainforest, was covered in woodlands during this cold spell. The coldest and driest conditions most likely occurred around 135,000 years ago, exposing the Sunda Shelf and connecting the major Indonesian islands to the continent. By 125,000 years ago, the environment had become substantially warmer and wetter, transforming Java into an island and allowing tropical rainforests to expand.
That scapulae. Wow.
Judging by the sheer number of specimens deposited at the same time, there may have been a sizable population of Homo soloensis before the volcanic eruption which resulted in their internment, but population is difficult to approximate with certainty. The Javanese site was some distance away from the northern coast of the island, but it is unclear where the southern shoreline and the mouth of the Solo River would have been. Cannibalism and ritual headhunting have also been proposed based on the conspicuous lack of any remains other than the skull cap. This had been reinforced by the historic practice of headhunting and cannibalism in some recent Indonesian, Australian and Polynesian groups, which at the time were believed to have descended from these Homo soloensis populations.
I mean, wasn't it just pirates?
Perhaps the horde was taken by surprise and fled. Perhaps the skulls were put down to mark off the area. It seems that even today, various tribes in New Guinea demarcate their dwelling or hunting grounds in a similar manner. They evidently suppose that the spirit dwelling in the skull can help them to defend a particular area against invaders. And with that statement, we leave you to ponder the mysteries of our human history. Until next time, stay curious and stay questioning.
What if everything you thought you...
These ovens are weird, dude. Fucking bracelet. It's like 40,000 years old, right? It's really fucking old. I'm going to Mars? Yeah, right. Little ass rockets.
Y'all, UFOs are everywhere.
Dude, I
and
like
as
that
we've
fucking
seen lately,
finger snap.
they've been making headlines all over the news. There are news reports coming in of UFOs in the government, of reverse engineered crafts, whistleblowers coming up and talking. It's literally, it's insane how much information is pouring out. And while some of it is misinformation, a lot of it is true and accurate. Like this News Nation report just recently of a pilot that came clean about last year nearly getting, I guess, hit with a UFO, not hitting one, but being hit with one. Apparently, this is insane. The way that it's explained is that the US government plane barely dodged a football-sized cylindrical UFO last year. The pilot goes public for the first time with audio of the encounter. He says after passing the object, they registered it 60 miles away. The object then suddenly turns around and hops back and forth 50 miles towards the plane like freaking hopscotch. That is not normal. And trained pilots and pilots that have been around forever know what the hell's happening in the sky. So if they're confused and concerned, we need to know what the hell's going on up there. Ashley Banfield, again, just killing it over at News Nation. I need y'all to sound off in the comments. What do you think about this?
A year ago, February, they took evasive action when a football-like Tic Tac came out of nowhere, heading straight for them. Thinking it was a missile, they ducked the aircraft to the left to avoid a head-on collision and raised the right wing so that the thing could pass right underneath them. And while they reported it right away, they did not talk about it publicly.
It was against the law. It just changed the law like a few years ago.
Troy 2-1, go ahead.
It's not weird, but I just had something pass underneath my wing, maybe like a football-sized object right underneath our wing.
Wow.
Troy 2-1, Roger. Do you think it was a drone or?
I have no idea. I got my sensor operator looking for it on the camera right now. We'll see if we can find it. But it's like a dark gray cylindrical object, and it was probably the size of a football, and it passed maybe 10 feet under our right wing.
The size of a football. Sure, you know, it's just
Roger, thank
it was
you for the
bigger.
report. Keep me advised if you find anything else out.
Yeah, we'll do. We're looking for it now.
And Ben is here with me now live to talk about it. Holy cow.
This guy's a goofball.
Wow, Ben. First of all, kudos to you for getting a crew member to talk, because that's one of the hardest things in this whole mystery, right, is to get somebody who's an actual witness to describe it, especially a reliable witness like these guys. But it's amazing that they described what they saw as thinking it was a surface-to-air missile.
Yeah, so it was actually that first News Nation breaking news that we did with you that got them to connect with me. And I wanted to verify because there is no video actually of this. They did try to attempt to video this with a camera that sits underneath the nose and the belly, but they didn't have time. I mean, this thing basically came at them at a 1 or 12 o'clock position and first appeared as a glint, like a flash. And then in an instant, the pilot had looked down at what they call the TCAS, which is their scope that tells them other air traffic in the area, didn't see anything, looks back up, and within that about 2 seconds, the thing has closed the distance so quickly that he instinctively reacts. In his mind, he's thinking someone is shooting a surface-to-air missile at us. So he takes evasive action.
Okay, so then the next thing that's fascinating about that video, if we were to play the whole thing out long, is that these pilots are communicating with the ground and saying, this thing turned around and started coming back for us. That's my very inarticulate way of describing it. But tell me what they said happened when the thing, the Tic Tac, whatever it is, came back for them.
So forgive the crudity of the model, but I didn't have time to have my animator redo the video. So here we have a model that's not the real plane, right, the type, but it's flying along. And as this Tic Tac is a jelly bean, actually, is heading towards them, they instinctively turn off the autopilot. So this sets off an alarm, instantly wakes up all the crew, what's going on, and banks to the left. Okay, so he pops up this wing enough because he thinks he's in a collision with this object. It passes, he believes, either directly under him or slightly
we were just trying
off.
to rob some drug dealers.
It continues on
and
behind
these
them.
Tic-Tacs would not
So
leave
he
us
gets
alone.
the sensor operator involved, and they have a very sophisticated radar on board. See if you can find this thing. Well, that's where they believe they tracked an object, their same altitude, 20,000 feet, 60 miles behind them. In a couple of seconds, that object then jumps to about 20 miles closer to them, back to 30 or 40, and then again to 10. It's like it's playing hopscotch back and forth, and they have no idea what this is.
So obviously, I think most important question here would be, how did this crew member react, and what have they done with this information since, and how were they received delivering the news?
He's just
about
gonna
what
play
they went
this whole
through?
segment. Come on.
Well, first of all, as we
Ripping
always
off my
say,
girl
in
Liz.
incidents like this, it is a safety of flight issue, and that's why they called LA Center, the air traffic control, to report to them what just happened, right? They did their best to try and document, to try and record this thing. They're really concerned about it. It doesn't make sense that over California you'd have a surface-to-air missile coming at you, but instinctively, I've been flying as a pilot, and I've had like a bird come towards my wing and pop that wing up really quick so I don't collide with it. That's a concern. Nobody should be flying at 20,000 feet unidentified, and this object had no means of visible propulsion. There was no smoke, no streak, no anything as it passes by. So how is it flying, and how is it going several times the speed of sound? And then hopping back and forth. It reminds us of the Navy Tic Tac video in 2004, right? And they described that on radar covering 60 miles in mere seconds. So same, California coastline, same kind of description.
Man,
And in that survey, what we found is that there is some kind of highly conductive mass with a unique shape from between 100 and 200 feet underground.
Wow.
When we were passing under here, when we were over here, we were hitting metal, but we were passing under the object.
Dude, this is great.
And the manta ray.
You can milk like several fucking seasons of a TV show out of some weird object getting radar reflections underground, right?
Oh, he said.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, we've been told that there is a manta ray under here. Exact
shape of a manta ray, but being a craft.
Yeah.
A manta ray. They literally said manta ray.
Who said that, and what technology did they use?
These are people from Bigelow's team that has leaked information to us that looked through files from when they were up here.
Are you kidding? Right? That is such a remarkable coincidence.
What's incredible is that we had just learned about it. It just sort of just all came together. Y'all didn't front load him with that.
No, that came out of absolute nowhere. Jeff and Carl didn't know why it had that nickname. We had never heard that before until this exact investigation.
This is startling.
Oh, yeah.
This is so startling. I think the fact that a completely independent third party conjured up the same term is beyond coincidence.
During that projection, we identified an ultra low frequency that was emanating from the area, 68 hertz. We took that, turned it around, and
You
put
should
it
get
back in the
Felipe out
environment
there.
by projecting it out of our own tone generator. When we did that, we actually saw a change in the RF spectrum.
Dude, get
where the
Felipe
original
in
signal
Corrado.
seemed to intensify.
Corrado.
So it's almost as if you're getting a response. There is an answer, if you will, coming back.
That's what it felt like we were doing. We're putting out something and we're getting something back.
It really does look like some type of communication.
But whatever this thing was, it completely wreaked havoc on all of our technical equipment. On 2 separate occasions, these $20,000 professional EMS shielded drones got completely hijacked and crashed out of the sky. And on several occasions, they were moving forward in a motion and then suddenly stopped, just like they hit a force field or an invisible
Dude, that's
wall
what
in the
Jake
sky.
Barber said, huh?
Even more astonishing than that,
That's wild.
the GPS recorded in those events internally on the drone. The first time that it happened, it recorded as if it was flying over Cuba, even though we were in Nevada, like it was
We were
headed towards
hacked
the
by
Bermuda
the fucking
Triangle.
regime.
And then a full year later, it happened again, and the GPS falsely recorded inside the drone that it was flying over the Pacific Ocean, over the Pacific
Fidel.
Northwest,
He
headed
hacked your
over
shit, bro.
Canada in almost
You
the
deserved
exact
it.
same flight path as the year before. So it was super bizarre. It kept crashing the drones out of the sky, and these are 2 completely different drones. They're not the same drone being brought back. And we're in Nevada. This thing is spoofing our drones every time we try to fly them.
every day.
And we
at 9.
also
Oh,
brought
yeah.
in a $200,000 piece of drilling equipment and attempted to access the tunnel systems to literally go in the underground, approach the manta ray up close. And not only at this moment did I honestly get calls from strange government agents trying to intimidate
Really?
us and scare us from what we were doing, but right when we started operating that big drill rig,
Interesting.
some kind of electromagnetic wave killed the entire tractor. So it was super strange. The whole
That's
thing
weird.
had layers of mystery.
That's really
but
weird.
It honestly all started when we figured out that ultra low frequency, and whatever was underground, it responded to us. And then the Skywatcher team, they're talking a lot about the same problem. They've even had entire control systems of a helicopter get locked
Dude, I'm
up.
telling you,
on
Jake Barber
mid-flight.
rips off his whole
We're
fucking
incapable
vibe
of
from
going
fucking
up
my man
or
Carl over
forward.
here.
Even the physical stick of the helicopter
What,
itself.
it was
would
like
not
a.
move forward.
That's like some fucking Richard
Over
Scary
4,000 hours
shit.
of flight
Like,
time.
okay, let's play
It's never happened
Redemption
before.
Song, have wind down.
So we don't know
time.
how they're jamming us. We don't know how they're turning our equipment off yet. Best guess would be a microwave signal. We're not seeing it on the frequencies we're using for our collection equipment.
And it was pretty amazing to hear the team at Skywatcher admit all of these technological fails. And when this happens, surprisingly, the psionic team members seem to have the opposite effect. The telepathic members of the team
my girl call me
suddenly
psionic
make
team member.
contact and they can almost see the future. And this is happening at the exact same time as the man-made technology is completely jammed
Dude,
and
that's
failing.
'cause they're taking the
And
spice.
it surprised me that they sort of casually also mentioned
the
that the
future when you
psionic
take spice.
assets telepathically predicted how many UFOs were going to appear, what direction they were going to come from, how they were going to interact. And they did all of this a full 24 hours before it happened. This is mind-blowing to me because this is actual precognition. And if that's true, it means they predicted the future before it happened, then everybody saw it and they captured the data and the footage. And I think that's pretty amazing and validating for a lot of us who have felt premonitions and experienced this kind of synchronization or
premonition.
manifestation happen in their own life. And that's pretty much how part 2 of this video ended. And apparently part 3 is going to focus mostly on the psionic aspects. And I'm really excited to hear about that because it feels like we honestly have a big wave of disclosure that's coming. And I agree that none of this footage is up close or on the ground. It's not anything that you could just walk up to and touch yet, and for that kind of validation. But at least instead of this all being kept behind a curtain of secrecy, it's starting to get pulled open. And Skywatcher is openly asking for people to help. And I also think it's an open challenge.
Dude, me
Take
can
what
pay
they
you,
are
dude.
showing us and what we have figured out on this YouTube channel together, and also go out and try to see for ourselves.
Into the light. Into the light. They give me the same ass suggestions. They built the Federal Reserve over a sacrificial altar? Really?
We need to talk about ICE, because what is happening right now is not normal. My name is Kat Abou-Ghazaleh. I'm a researcher and journalist who studies the far right, and I'm running for Congress in Illinois because the people I've been covering for the last 5 years, well, now they run our government. And ICE is their weapon to circumvent the law and scare the rest of us into silence. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It was created with the Department of Homeland Security in 2002 as a response to the September 11th terrorist attacks. According to ICE, their mission is to protect America from the cross-border crime and illegal immigration that threaten national security and public safety, which might not sound quite right if you've read the news lately. Since Trump took office, ICE has deported 2 children, a 2-year-old and a 10-year-old, actively being treated for cancer. I might be wrong, but I don't really see how a 2-year-old with cancer threatens national security. Neither does Mohsen Madawi, who was arrested at his citizenship interview. He is just one of the 1,000+ students who are being targeted by this administration for exercising their right to free speech. Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeysa Ozturk, 2 of the more covered cases, were both detained without warrants. After being arrested, Khalil was moved from New York to a prison in Louisiana without the knowledge of his pregnant wife, who ICE also threatened to arrest. Ozturk's big crime was writing an op-ed in her student paper. She was kidnapped by plainclothes officers who, once again, did not have a warrant. And then, of course, we have the 238 Venezuelan men who were deported to a mega prison in El Salvador without due process. Since their deportation, it's been uncovered that 3/4 of them have no criminal record, and only a dozen of them have been charged for crimes like murder and assault. But that didn't stop the Trump administration and ICE from deporting them to one of the most notorious prisons in the world, known for its inhumane treatment and slave labor. I've seen a lot of people compare ICE to the Gestapo, the secret police in Nazi Germany. The Gestapo was responsible for mass raids against ethnic and religious minorities, mainly Jewish people, but also political dissidents like communists, anti-fascists, and people generally critical of the Third Reich. These undesirables would then be shipped off to ghettos, small, poorly maintained detention centers, or concentration camps, some of which weren't even in Germany. The US Holocaust Memorial Museum defines concentration camps as camps in which people are detained or confined, usually under harsh conditions, and without regard to legal norms of arrest and imprisonment that are acceptable in a constitutional democracy. And while Trump's deportations, of course, don't yet match the scale and systematic nature of the Holocaust, that definition sounds unnervingly familiar. And if you think it's distasteful to draw parallels between Trump and the Nazis, take it from Trump himself. Oh, I forgot to mention that a Wisconsin judge was just arrested by the FBI. Her crime? Allegedly stopping ICE from arresting a man without a warrant. Probably nothing to worry about, right? I find the parallels between the Gestapo and ICE compelling, but I'm not sure if they're necessary. This is happening right here, right now. This is an American organization acting under an American president to attack one of the most important institutions in any democracy: due process. Due process is the idea that the government can't take someone's life, liberty, or property without giving them the chance to defend themselves. And if you deny due process to any person, citizen or not, the system falls apart. Due process is supposed to be inalienable, something guaranteed to every human. It is the only thing standing between us and a police state where you can be arrested for anything at any time. And if you can deny it to one person, you can deny it to anyone. This is scary. It is not normal, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. The road to atrocities is paved by people telling you you are overreacting. And if you're somehow still thinking, well, that all sounds bad, but they should have come here legally, well then think about it this way. If they can kidnap people with legal visas over free speech, if they can send hundreds of people to a concentration camp overseas, if they can arrest an elected official, a US citizen, for doing her job, what can they do to you? Can they revoke citizenship from my dad or your coworker who were naturalized decades ago just because they don't like Trump? Can they detain you for years over, say, a parking ticket? Can they execute a person with no criminal record just because the president said to? We genuinely don't know. This
Trump
is
should go after Tom DeLonge. You know, because he's always like talking shit on the GOP. That would be funny if Tom DeLonge and Trump got into like an online spat. Your numbers are not even any good, Tom. No one likes you anymore. You're washed.
Validate power. And Lauren Mesa Ozturk and
You're
Hannah
caught
Dugan
it.
and the
It's all
238 men imprisoned in El Salvador might be the first targets. I promise you, they will not be the last if we don't call this out for what it is. But this can't be normalized if we don't let it be normalized. And there are a few ways you can do that in your daily life. First off, know your rights.
And I'll
ICE
donate
is
it
not the end-all, be-all of the
Abu
law,
Ghazala.
and you have rights whether or not you're a U.S. citizen. I've linked some resources from the ACLU in the description, so make sure to click those and read up. Second, protect your community. If ICE is in your area, record their arrests. You are allowed to do that. And make sure your neighbors know their rights, even if one or all of them are U.S. citizens. And finally, don't accept this. It is so easy to fall into complacency, especially when the most powerful people in the country are telling you that this is how we have to live. But we don't. We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to turn against each other. This is not normal. And while I know it is exhausting to care, and it's only been like 3 months of this administration, we simply cannot afford apathy right now. Stay informed, don't comply in advance, and push back against people.
Like, the best we saw was that fucking lady on MSNBC, right? That's about as good as you're gonna get. It's fucking pathetic. Granted, that lady's probably gonna be fucking, primary defeated, right? For her tepid criticism.